All right, welcome everyone to the Chicago Football Connection podcast. We are your hosts, Steve at CFC Bears and Luke at Luke O'Grady. We are talking NFL draft as we have been for the past 6 months, it feels like. But we just this week released our position rankings for the offensive line and defensive line.
The
So
trenches.
the trenches, in my opinion, it's the most fun position groups to talk about and the most fun position groups to scout. So I
Oh,
always
dude,
look
I
forward to these
literally
podcasts.
couldn't disagree more. I
Really?
actually find it so fun. I'm like a receiver by trade when I play football, and
Yeah.
I love the receiver in the DB group. And actually, I was gonna say that maybe edge and defensive tackle was a little easier, but guard, center, and tackle, there was so much. If I woke up tomorrow, it would have been because in the rankings I had, so many of them were floating around that out of 100, a 71 to a 74. But then you take into account their athletic scores and stuff, and it could have changed on a dime from day to day, and it was kind of hard to put these together. So I'm excited to kind of see your reasonings, because we didn't have a whole lot of parity on our list, did we?
No, just really one position. Guard was really the only position we had some parity. So it'll be so exciting to get in and talk about it. But yeah, I get bored watching cornerback tape. I like the offensive line, defensive line. Something happens each and every play. You love that. So I love watching these guys. So we're gonna start with the offensive line, offensive tackles, then go to guards and centers, then go to edge, and then finish up with D tackle. Yep. We also want to discuss, if we have time, I don't know how long that's going to take. Sometimes we get off on tangents, but we also want to discuss the rumors about the Steelers trading up with the Bears and what that trade might look like, who they'd be targeting, stuff like that. So to make sure we have enough time, let's just jump right into it.
Yep.
Start with offensive tackle. So up on the screen is our offensive tackle rankings. A little bit of parity between us at the top. We had the same top two guys, just different order. But towards the end of the list, it gets a little bit tricky. But we should probably start at the top because obviously the Bears are going to be very much in play for probably those top four guys in the draft in the first round, whether if they trade down or stick at 9.
Yep.
And we do have. Oh no, we don't have the same top 4. So you have DeJuan Jones in your top 4. I chose to not rank DeJuan Jones.
Yeah.
Which. They did have scheduled a top 30 visit with him, so maybe I need to revisit that and put him back in there. But we'll start at the top. So
I think to some extent, it's almost important to kind of look at it like tiers. And I would say that both of our top twos are in their tier. And then afterwards, it gets to kind of I would say that after it, each one of those players, and even to some extent, what you're expecting from Paris Johnson is a little bit of developmental, what you're getting year 1, you're hoping he's not the same player year 3. But the thing with Paris Johnson is that ceiling is so high, and his level of play was at a point where I think you'd agree those two are kind of a cut above the rest.
I do agree. They are in a tier above Harrison and Jones for me, and pretty clearly too for me. I think there's a kind of a gap after those two guys. So if either of those two guys were the pick at 9,
that's kind of how I
fine with it. I have Darnell Wright as my number 1, and I hope it's Darnell Wright.
Yep.
If they picked Paris Johnson and Darnell Wright was still on the board, I'd completely understand because his ceiling is probably a little bit higher. I completely understand. Probably a little bit better for scheme fit, more athletic than Darnell Wright. So I get that 100%.
I would say that Darnell Wright and Paris Johnson are in this tier of, if they took them at 9, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
I like Broderick Jones. I've been waving the DeJuan Jones flag for months now. Anton Harrison has obviously a lot of upside, but those are guys where if you took them at 9, I would probably go,
Yeah,
just
both
because
those
of
guys.
Alternatives available. There's no way if they took Broderick Jones at 9 that Darnell Wright and Paris Jones wouldn't be there as well.
Right.
So I think that we both kind of agreed, and I would agree that and I think that we've talked about this, that Darnell Wright right now is the best tackle in this draft, especially considering what the modern NFL is going toward. From a technician and from a pass blocking point of view, I think that his tape is the best in the class.
Yeah, I think so too, and I don't think it's particularly close. I like Paris Johnson a lot, but there's a lot of things in his game that he needs to still work on. And I think he's still going to get better. I mean, he only started 1 year at left tackle. That was, in college. He obviously played it in high school, but the sky's the limit for Paris Johnson. But right now, if you want a guy who's going to come on week come in week one and solidify position, it's not Paris Johnson, it's Darnell Wright. But I completely understand why you ranked Paris Johnson over him, because you're betting on in 3 years Paris Johnson's going to be the better player, which makes sense. And the Bears might be in a position where that makes sense. It kind of seems like they're playing not so much for next year, but the year after.
Oh, so glad you said that, because I think if the Bears had been looking to win now next year, they would have had to do a lot different in the way they approach the tackle and free agency, just because whoever we get here, like I think we both agree that, Braxton Jones isn't the best pass blocking tackle. And maybe he can develop in that space. There's been, some people have different opinions. I know that Duke Manyweather has like a pretty high opinion of Braxton Jones, but then, Brandon Thorne, who a lot of people look at as like, probably the go-to opinion on offensive line play on Twitter, what a hilarious thing. Thinks that maybe there are some things that maybe Braxton Jones can't put together, but you need to think of it as one of your tackles you're going to need to lean your help towards. And if you really don't believe that Braxton Jones can make that step to be a pass protector, the guy that you're drafting in the first round, if they do draft a tackle, you're kind of assuming they're going to have to be put on an island. And if that's the case, Darnell Wright's the choice, 100%.
Right.
But if like you said, maybe they don't put as much weight into trying to be like Super Bowl contenders in 2023. I think in 3 years, Paris Johnson will be the best option in this class. Not only do I think that he's probably got the most upside from his athleticism point of view, I don't think that Darnell Wright's a bad athlete point of view, but we talked about this the other day, that Darnell Wright is probably technically the best. You could make an argument, maybe some guys that played against lower competition, but all things considered, I would say that Darnell Wright is technically like the most sound pass blocker in the class, whereas Paris Johnson has some space to grow in that. But if he does grow in that, he really could ascend to being like, a really, really great player in the space. The reason I have him at number 1 is that upside. I think aside from that too, like even if he just remained the player he was forever, I think he's a great run blocker. I think he's a really, really good pass protector. I think he has the tools to be a great player day one. Maybe not as good as Darnell Wright, but I think he's great. And for a team like the Bears, where there is so much uncertainty all across the board, the fact that he was a right guard for Ohio State last year, and a pretty damn good one last year, is a pretty encouraging sign. So that's why I have him at number 1.
And that makes complete sense. And and I have Darnell Wright at 1 because I like the player he is now. And I still think he also has still some room to grow. I've said this on our last pod, but I think people, when you talk about guys who are pro ready, you almost kind of equate that to being the low upside guy. But I don't think Darnell Wright is that. I do think he still has room to grow. If like the Bears do like lighter offensive linemen. He's about 330, I think. So if you drop 10 pounds off of him, he's still 320. Maybe gets his feet quickness a little bit better, and I think that could help him out as well. So I think both those guys, you really can't go wrong with either of them. If we're talking, we do have a question here I want to address. So
actually, a couple good points in the comments.
A couple good questions here. So what do you think about the idea that it's a waste to spend a top 10 pick on a right tackle?
You want to field this one? I have some thoughts.
Yeah, I could start. I don't agree with that at all. I have seen people say that, but to me, the right tackle and left tackle position in football are equally as important. The only thing that kind of differentiates them is how much they're paid. But to me, if you need a right tackle just as much as you need a left tackle. I mean, the whole blindside thing is important, but you can't. It's not a guard. It's not a center. I have no problem taking a right tackle in the top 10.
Yeah, I think honestly, maybe you could say that there's a little bit of a value difference between a left tackle and a right tackle on like when they say blindside, but especially with the way that people draw up plays nowadays, when they're cutting fields in halves and doing 2 read plays to one half of the field. If that one read is to the left side of the field, your right side tackle is now your blind side. And I could find you 100 pass plays from the Bears and from any team last year where there's actually the play where Justin Fields got absolutely walloped in the preseason against the Bills is a great example of when a blind side isn't the blind side because of the way the play is developing. So I think that's a little bit of a misnomer. And on top of that, I think that it used to make more sense when your best pass rusher on defense always came from the right side, but that isn't really the case anymore either. A lot of the best pass rushers on the team come from the left side now. Your Von Millers, your Zadarius Smiths when he's not off ball and rushing inside. And if they're coming from the left side on their defense, you need your right side tackle to be a great pass protector. And I think because of that, in the coming years, we're going to see the value between left tackle and right tackle kind of come closer together.
Yeah, and if you have, regardless if it's a weak link at right tackle or weak link at left tackle, defenses are going to put their best pass rusher up against your weak link. So if you have a really good pass block and left tackle and a weak right tackle, they're going to put you their best pass rusher on the right side, or vice versa. So you have to have a good pass blocker at both. And we've seen now. I mean, I kind of mentioned that he's not a guard, and guards are a little bit different, but a lot of teams have their best pass rusher on the interior now. So there's pass rushers all over the place. You got to have pass blockers.
You got to just add pass rushers where you
can
get them, and a lot of times that'll be the interior. So
right.
I think it's a little bit blown out that you need. I would say that it's definitely not a waste taking a right tackle anywhere. If you'd be happy taking a left tackle anywhere, you should be happy taking the right tackle there.
Yep, Alan's a big fan of Darnell Wright as well. Let's get into the next tier. Because that's when it gets kind of interesting. I feel like Paris Johnson, Darnell Wright, those two are kind of locks at 1-2 for most people. Maybe someone has Broderick Jones, but for us, we've been talking about a while. Those are our top two. But then the next tier gets interesting. I have the next tier is Anton Harrison, Broderick Jones. And if I had DeJuan Jones in my list, I admitted him for scheme fit, but maybe I need to rethink that. I would probably had him at 5. So basically the same tier that you have. Just
I think I would agree. I think after that, it kind of is a little bit of a fall off. I think both of us are fairly high on Matt Bergeron. I actually didn't even really notice you had Carter Moore that high. I know why you can make that argument. Yeah. It's not a bad argument at all. But I think that is kind of that next tier. I think Broderick Jones, Anton Harrison, and DeJuan Jones. And they all have their strengths and they all have their weaknesses.
Yeah. All three of them are really different guys.
Completely.
Completely different.
Like, the reasons you like Anton Harrison are absolutely not the reasons that you like Broderick Jones. They're almost completely opposite. And
those two guys for sure.
About as strong as it gets in the class. I don't know if you've never seen him really end up on his back. And Anton Harrison, on the flip side, you almost have to wonder, how often he's going to get driven through at the NFL if he doesn't, learn how to sit down in his set a little bit more. But I mean, I'll start. I have DeJuan Jones at 4, and I could have even had him at 3. I love DeJuan Jones. I think it's underrated how well he moves because he's 6'7", 6'8", 340 pounds. Like that just
he was 375 at the combine.
Is that how much?
Yeah.
So the reason that a lot of people are low on him is probably because of that, and there's very, very little parity with that. I don't know how many tackles in the NFL are starting in the NFL over 350. Like Orlando Brown is probably in that space, and even then, me and Tommy Cavanaugh, Bears blog boys, we're talking about how those guys are similar in height and weight, and so different in the way that they play.
Yeah,
because he's so tall and because I think so much of his weight is top heavy, I think he moves better. I think he's got really good feet. And because of that, I think that he makes a lot of sense in a Bears scheme for a zone scheme. I think he really does play the zone scheme well. I think he moves well. I think he's actually a fairly technical pass blocker. Can he play wide zone? Alan Twilley just asked, can he play wide zone? I think he can. I think he moves, but I think his 40 time isn't as indicative as he is as a mover. His 10-yard split, which I think is way better when you're looking at how they can move in his zone scheme, was pretty good. I think it was like a 1-7 flat, a 1-7-2-3 in that zone, which is totally fine. He doesn't need to be the fastest in the space, but he does. That's not going to sink him by any means. I think he's got a lot of tricks in the pass game. He's got 36.5-inch arms, which basically means that anybody that's undersized isn't going to get to his chest, even if they want to. And because of that, I think that some of the shortcomings he may have with speed rushers, he can actually make up for. And I think that and we talked about this with Darnell Wright, with a little bit of improvement on the technical side, I think he's going to have a good career in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. So we differ on this. I actually don't think he's a fit for the scheme. Obviously, I didn't put him in my list, and that was the reason. And we don't know which one of us is right. I think there's a good enough argument you can make both directions, but it's just my opinion that I would not draft him at 5 with the Bears just because of the athletic deficiencies. I do agree that he is more athletic than you would expect. Like he's not like Orlando Brown. He's more athletic than Orlando Brown. I just don't know if he's athletic enough to do what they want to do. I also, I do like his tape. Like I said, I would have had him definitely above Carter Warren. So I probably would have had him at 5, maybe in front of Broderick Jones. I don't know, but at least 5. But there are some, this isn't like a guy who, isn't a great fit for the scheme, but his tape is so dominant that you can overlook that. He still would be the 5th best tackle in this class. So at that point, I'm like, I'd rather go with a guy who's a scheme fit. It's not like we're talking about an elite prospect here who just maybe has one deficiency. So I do think he struggles. It's oddly enough, I think he doesn't actually struggle with speed that much. You think because he's so long, he's just able to run people around the arc. It's when people try to get to his inside that he has trouble redirecting and staying in front of him. So that's what he struggles with pass protection and the run game. They do run a ton of outside zone. Ohio State does.
Yeah.
Like it's fun to watch them because that's kind of what I'm envisioning when I think about the Bears. So I'm watching Paris Johnson, I'm watching Luke Weipler, and watching DeJuan Jones running what the Bears want to run. I just don't think there were a lot of times where he wasn't able to execute those reach blocks or get out in space to the second level. But I think he's going to be a hell of a player in the NFL. Me personally, I think it's going to be somewhere else. But
like devil's advocate for your argument, I don't think that there's a position in the NFL where you're going to get a bigger jump about the athletes you're playing against in college versus the athletes you're going to play against in the NFL than offensive tackle to defensive end. Like you might be able to out athlete and out freak, out alien people in the college league as a tackle, but when you get to the NFL, every defensive end you play against has something for you. And like as much as I think there were some times when maybe he was able to reach and get people around him in like the zone scheme at Ohio State, I actually thought he did lovely in the zone scheme of Ohio State. I do have some concerns about him being able to do that when everyone was the best athlete on their team in the NFL kind of thing.
Right.
So I know what you mean. I would like to hear why you have Anton Harrison above Broderick Jones, because I have Anton Harrison there almost dutifully. I think I liked Broderick Jones' tape a lot more, and I have my concerns about Anton Harrison. I think, like I said, I think there were some moments in the college game when he looked like, maybe an inferior athlete or like not as strong as the people he was going against, and I just have my worries that that'll continue to a further extent at the NFL level.
Yeah, so I've soured on Anton Harrison a lot since I first watched him. But I still the reason I have him above Broderick Jones is pretty simple. It's pass blocking ability.
Yep.
That's what I value more from an offensive tackle. I think Broderick Jones is a better run blocker. I think Anton Harrison's a better pass blocker, and pass blocking to me is a more important trait. I do agree that he has some issues with play strength, although I think sometimes that's a little bit overblown with him. It's almost, to me, it does show up sometimes. It's not like it doesn't, but to me, it's almost more of which maybe this is even a bigger concern. It's almost more of like a tenacity issue where he's almost like, a little passive more than anything. And again, maybe that's a bigger issue than the actual play strength issue. But from an athletic standpoint,
because as far as like we were saying, like comparatively, Broderick Jones is a dog.
Yeah.
Like has that in spades, like wants that contact, like wants all the smoke when he plays. And, and you see that on tape.
Yeah, but I think as a pass protector, he's got 34-inch arms. He uses them well. His footwork, and he's able to get to his landmarks very quickly and smoothly. He doesn't struggle, with speed. So he's going to be able to kind of step in right away and be a good pass blocking left tackle who will need to get stronger, which I hate saying because I say that everyone says that every year about draft prospects. He just needs to get stronger. Well, that's everyone. And most of the time, those players, these guys are 22, 23. These guys are 22, 23. They're not 18 years old. Like they're pretty strong. They're pretty maxed out physically, most of them. So they can get a little bit stronger, but they're not going to, get a ton stronger. So there are concerns there. And that's why I have them at 3. Honestly, I just don't really love this offensive tackle class outside of Don Alright and Paris Johnson. So it's almost like Anton Harrison's there
after those top 2 are kind of like it's a bit of a toss up. Like you want to kind of say that Anton Harrison, Broderick Jones, and maybe DeJuan Jones are like in like that second tier, but man, like Bergeron could be in the next tier. I see you have Carter Warren there, but like, I don't know if I'd put him there, but like Carter Warren's pass blocking ability is absolutely within like the top echelon of this class. Like to some extent, like 4 through 10, 4 through 8, we'll say, are all kind of in that range of like, I don't know if I love them. I think if we took them on Matt Bergeron, if we took on day 2, I don't think Anton Harrison or Broderick Jones make it to day 2.
No.
But after that, like, Jalen Duncan, Blake Freeland, Wanya Morris, Braden Daniels, all those guys, like, maybe with our first pick in the 3rd round, I'd feel good about it. But other than that, it would feel like we're reaching for a need.
Yeah, I agree. And Matt Bergeron is, I think he's a guy I would take on day 2. Carter Warren, I have him at 5, but he has an injury. He was injured this year. So it's not like it's almost like I have him rated that high, but I wouldn't draft him that high, which is kind of a weird thing to say. If they did draft him that high, I would be, understand it. I'd be okay with
Matt
it. But
Bergeron
I don't think he's
in like his own tier.
Yeah. I mean, Matt Bergeron is just so solid. It's just like watching it. I think it's funny. We both have him at 6 because it's just like he doesn't do anything that blows you away. He also doesn't get beat very often. He's just solid. And he'll probably, I think his upside's limited as well. He's just going to be solid probably. So if they get him in the, that'd be a good pick at 61. It's not going to, you're not going to be super excited about it, but you'll probably be more excited about it in 5 years when he's been solidly a quality starter at left or right tackle.
No, I think he showed some versatility as well, and for a team, I think a lot of the upside and the reason I'll scale people higher than other people in some of these lists is versatility. Being that we could get 3 weeks into a season and realize that like Nate Davis ain't it, and you want to have a body on the team that maybe you think can go and play guard or that can go and play left tackle that was maybe playing right tackle. And Matt Bergeron had a lot of snaps in his college career at right tackle as well, so there's a benefit there as well. I thought his tape, like you said, is extremely clean. Very, very few holes. Maybe you'd agree, very few flashy plays. Like I don't think that he ever blew anyone out of the water. Not even on a season point of view, and even on a game-to-game point of view, I don't think there was any games where I mean, to be fair, a lot of these prospects, you only really watch 2 or 3 games of their tape, and then look into like highlights and athletic scores and things like that, and try and put it all together. But I think he would be like the kind of definition of a really, really high floor player.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but also kind of I don't want to say low ceiling player, but someone's driving by. Someone's having fun night.
I think there's opportunity. I don't think. I think it's honestly unfair to call anyone a very low ceiling player unless they're just an abysmal athlete, which we'll get to later. There's some people that I love the tape, but once you found out their athletic score, you're like, oh man.
Yeah.
Like we said, like once you get to the NFL, you're playing against the best athletes that were all the best athletes on their team. And like even the ones starting the NFL are still the best athletes on their team. So you can't be at that disadvantage, especially at the tackle position where if you're a bad athlete, and it's the reason why neither of us have Peter Skoronski at this list. It's not that he's a bad athlete, but from a physical point of view, he pretty well needs to be perfect if he wants to be a starting and excelling tackle in the NFL with his size arms. Because people that are like less talented than him and less athletic than him, that can get through to his chest easily, are going to expose him for reasons that are almost out of his control. And because of that, like you need to be a great athlete in some of these positions.
For sure. Yeah. So I want to get to the other positions, but there are 3 more things I want to just kind of discuss here. So interestingly, I thought this was interesting when I saw your list. So we both had one guy on our list that the other person didn't rank. I had Jalen Duncan at 7. You had Wanya Morris at 8. I think that's interesting because I view those 2 players, not view them similarly, but I think they're very similar players in that they're very athletic offensive tackles with good length and good athleticism, but rough tape from time to time. But I think it's just interesting that both of us went in a different direction of which one we liked more. I think both of them, could be quality players at the next level. I actually like one of the reasons why I had Duncan high is because, and then the tape is rough from time to time. So I fully acknowledge that, but he's super athletic. He's got good length. I also think if he doesn't work out a tackle, I think he could make a really good guard. Where Wanya Morris, I don't see it as much because he's almost like too long. He's got like almost 36-inch arms. He doesn't have the anchor quite that Duncan did. So Yeah, so I like Duncan more because he's got that fallback option if he doesn't make it a tackle. And honestly, a couple of these guys I think probably end up at guard. Duncan maybe one, Daniels and Saldiveri I think most likely end up at guard, which is so
Yep.
it's interesting. I don't know if there's even 10 offensive tackles in this class, to be honest, like at all. Because I think some of these guys are guards, and Peter Skronsky, we both have at guard. It's just
100%. We have Cody Mock at guard, who I think
Cody Mock at guard,
had a great career at tackle. Yeah, I mean, Jalen Duncan. It's funny you say that, is because I actually kind of view them like in a vacuum similarly. But my thing with Jalen Duncan was that I thought he wasn't a great pass protector, which is a big one. And I also thought that year over year, not only did he not get better, but like his 21 tape is so much better than his 22 tape. And I thought that Wanya Morris's 22 tape was really like encouraging based on his 21 tape. So I thought that Wanya Morris was trending in the right direction. I think Wanya Morris is maybe a little more toolsy than Jalen Duncan, even though I don't think it's fair to say that Jalen Duncan isn't toolsy. But I was a little bit worried by the way that he was trending, I guess.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, his Duncan's 2021 was a lot better than his 2022, and it's clear as day that that's the case. So I get what you're. That's a good. I never actually really considered that. But that is a good point. But yeah, I don't know. I actually had at one point Jalen Duncan higher than that, but I moved him down because I thought I might have been a little crazy.
Dude, there's a couple on the list that we'll go through today where I was like, I even messaged it to you. I was like, I feel crazy doing this, but I just can't. I basically can't like fall in line with what everyone else is saying just based on what I've seen and like, and the athletic scores with it. And I kind of was like, I kind of felt that I was going to be on that train with Blake Freeland, but I was glad that you put him where you did, because I feel like I have Blake Freeland there, and honest to God, in my head, I could have put him above Matt Bergeron. I love his tape. I think he tested as one of the biggest freak athletes at the tackle position in a long time. Maybe like he did so because he's a little undersized, but the way he played the zone scheme at BYU, I thought was a perfect fit. I thought similar to Wanya Morris, every year he got a lot better. And I would say that his tape, he was a player that, not a lot of these dudes did. I would say that he verged on having dominant tape this year versus the competition he played against. I don't know if he had one game this year where he looked completely like outmatched. And when he had games against like really, really solid competition, the Notre Dame game, the Oregon game, I thought he looked like Blake Freeland, I think, has an opportunity to really surprise me.
I agree. I like Blake Freeland. Like you said, the first thing that jumps out is the athleticism. And like when he went out to the combine, tested as an elite athlete, and no one was really surprised because it shows up. It's not like, you sometimes when guys go to the combine, you're like, that guy put up like a 10 RAS score. Like that wasn't the case with Blake Freeland. Everyone kind of expected him to test really well. You said it yourself, though, the level of competition wasn't great. But he did perform well against the few teams that he did play against.
Was it like when he had his chance? Like I thought he stuck. Like he kind of big man Isaiah Foskey a little bit.
Yeah, but if we're talking about a guy who needs to get stronger, Blake Freeland's probably the poster child of that. Like his anchor's not good.
No.
So
he's like, is he 300 pounds? Is he 300?
I think he was like just barely over 300 pounds.
95 or something. Yeah.
And the problem is another problem. I mean, he's 6'8", so he's 6'7" and 6/8 or whatever. So he's really tall. So and those tall offensive linemen just have trouble with their knee bend. It's just every tall offensive lineman does. It's not something that's exclusive to Blake Freeland. I almost wish he was like a little bit shorter because he would be able to get bend his knees a little bit easier. And keep that athleticism, and that would help him with his anchor, because when 100%. He gets in trouble is when he just plays too high and doesn't have that knee bend, and then he just gets
sit down on a speed rush and gets run over. The only thing I will say is that because he's 6'8", and the way you can look at him and say, like to some extent, when some of the games you look at him and be like, is this a tight end? He has the frame to add 20 pounds.
Oh, easy. He needs to.
He does. I'd agree. He does. He needs to find himself somewhere in between Sam Laporta and DeJuan Jones.
Yeah. All right, we should probably move on. I just want to give a shout out to Nick Saldiveri. We both have him at 10. I really wanted to include Nick Saldiveri in my top 10. That's part of the reason I left DeJuan Jones out, just because I think he's underrated and has a chance. And I've been vocal onto it. I really love Braden Daniels too. But anything else you want to say before we move on to the Interior.
Yeah, I think to some extent that a lot of these guys, if you ask any of them to be day one starters, they probably will have some trouble. But if
Yeah.
they get themselves to a line like the Bengals, like if Dewan Jones gets drafted to the Bengals, for example, and gets to be, or Darnell Wright gets drafted to the Bengals and gets to be the right tackle opposite someone who's like a very pure sit down and pass block tackle like Orlando Brown, and they can move tight ends to a side and move right tackles to a side and hide them a little bit. I think that you'll be pleasantly surprised with a lot of these guys. But I think if you ask
For
them
sure.
to be like a starting franchise left or right tackle week one this year, other than what we said, maybe Darnell Wright and Paris Johnson, you might, you're gonna have a bad time.
Yeah, for sure. I think I 100% agree with that. All right, let's move on to guards and centers. So we just did a top 5 for guards and centers to make it easy, but
Yeah,
we could probably talk about a few other guys that if we want to. So as I mentioned before, we did have a little bit of parity at the guard position. We had the same 5 players at least, just a slightly different order.
yeah.
I liked when I saw that you had Steve Avila too. I thought for sure you're going to have either Mock or Torrance ahead of him. So glad we're on the same page there.
I was high on Torrance early, and then
You were, I remember.
the more I kind of like looked at it, the more I started to have worries at how like his dominance would translate, because he's a guy that I would say had some dominant tape. He kind of, if he got his hands on you, it was good in a phone booth, but I don't think he moves as good as he should for the position. I think Peter Skoronski had the best tape of any offensive lineman in the class.
Yeah.
And we have him here as a tackle just because of the arm thing. It's honestly the reason we have Cody Mock here as well, as the arm thing. And honestly, if Peter Skoronski had been an open as willing to like participate in some of those drills at the guard position as Cody Mock would, there wouldn't be as much hesitation about it. To be fair, I think because Skoronski's tape is so good, and like I said earlier, for Skoronski to succeed at tackle, he needs to be like a foolish technician as soon as he shows up in the league. But I don't doubt that that's impossible. So I think that he should get a look at tackle or a try at tackle when he shows up to whatever team drafts him. I think inevitably he'll end up at this position. And when he does, I think he'll have the tools to be one of the best guards in the league. Like, I don't know if as a guard prospect, he's too far off from a Quentin Nelson. Maybe Quentin Nelson was probably a bit of a better guard prospect, but someone like Ali Vera Tucker, I don't know how you could ever say that Skoronski's any worse than that, if not maybe a little bit better.
Yeah,
so
I think that's a good count.
Steve Avila, man, I think everybody's at him shoot up the board a little bit over the last and it's a little tough to kind of see like what are the reasons to not have him there. I think he moves well. It looks like he's got amazing game sense. When he's in a phone booth and it's just him versus defensive tackle, he very rarely gets beat. He's nasty. He's like the things that you love about him in the run game are the same things you love about him in the pass game. Like, I don't think he's got a whole lot of weakness to his game.
Yeah, I agree. We've mentioned a lot play strength and guys who need to get stronger. That's not Steve Avila. Steve Avila is good there. He really uses his hands well, and that's probably, I think Duke Manyweather said it about guards, like hand use is almost more important as a guard because you're closer to the defender, so you have to use your hands effectively to keep the guys off balance. So, and he does that so well. Probably, I mean, definitely better of the guys at guard. I mean, we haven't really seen Peter Skoronski at guard. I think he'll be able to do it. That's why I have him ranked higher. But of the other guys who actually have played guard in college, he definitely has the best hand use. And yeah, as a pass protector, and like I said, I value pass protecting more than run blocking. It's hard to find someone better than Steve Avila who did that at the college level. I do think he could be a little bit better in the run game, but that's just nitpicking at this point. I think he's perfect. Cyrus Torrance, I actually thought about not ranking him as well in here, kind of like I did with Dewan Jones, because I don't know if he's really going to be on the Bears board, but he did have a decent RAS score, so I kept him in there.
Yeah, and like he had so we're down on him, but I think 2 months ago you could make an argument that the whole draft process probably had him as the number one guard on the board. And there's some tape that you would go and watch for Osiris Torrance that would make that completely evident. Like when he played Georgia and he played against probably the best player in the draft, he absolutely held his own. like Jalen Carter made a bunch of people look really stupid this year, and made a bunch of people look really stupid the year before and the year before. Like, he was on a team with 5 first rounders when he was a redshirt freshman and was still one of the better players in that defense. And Osiris Torrance looked completely in his element defending him, which is like, a really, really good sign. But then he'd also have games where it didn't look like he was as dominant as he should be versus people that weren't Jalen Carter. And it looked like maybe if he got out in space, it would have been a bit of an issue. I thought his his gap grade was way better than like what he looked like in the zone space. And as much as I think it doesn't matter as much pass protecting for a guard, in that like pass protecting for a guard has a lot to do with the way that you interact with your tackles and your center. It's not as much like a tackle where you're on an island and it's just how well can you pass protect. It has a lot of game sense, which is why I think Steve Avila, despite the fact that maybe I don't know if his tools are like the best like pass protecting tools there are, his game sense is incredible in the way he get leverage into his center and leverage into his tackle. I had some concerns about the way that Osiris Torrance's game sense was in like directing tackles to the correct space during pass rushing sets.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really well said, and that's a really good point. I think with Torrance, he also he played at Florida this year, but he's a transfer from a smaller school, and I'm blanking on the school. But he just had 1 year at a high level school, so that will probably come to him. But yeah, I agree. I think Avila was kind of clearly above him for me. And you actually had Cody Mock ahead of Torrance, who, if we're talking about just like scheme fits for the Bears, Mock is definitely a better scheme fit than Torrance. He blew up the combine. I think he had like a 7.13 3 cone, something like that, and which was like better than like Tank Dell or someone.
Yeah.
It was like crazy.
Yeah.
He's super athletic.
We shared our lists, and we like sight unseen, we shared our guard list and had the exact same guard list. And I was a little bit like, I thought about putting Cody Mock ahead of Osiris Torrance anyway, because of just basically projection. I think Cody Mock has the tools to be an absolute stud at the guard position. But because we have the exact same list, and for the interest of like having the conversation, I was like, you know what? I'm happy putting Cody Mock above it. And there's a couple of people that we'll talk to on the other list too, where it was like kind of a tape and expectation, like that kind of battle where it's like, who can you be versus what do we see on tape? I think Osiris Torrance tape is better than Cody Mock's, despite, Cody Mock plays tackle. I think the things that you saw on tape, like Osiris Torrance, was a little bit better. But I think that with a lot of this class, in like the mindset was, who will they be in 3 years? PFF Brad had a great quote today that like the best GMs are drafting this year for the holes they expect to have in 2 years, not this year, because you can't really expect rookies to go and plug holes for you that well, especially with the hit rate in the NFL draft. I think in 2 years, Cody Mock has a chance to be a way better guard than Osiris Torrance. But of the people on the list, maybe Peter Skoronski removed, Osiris Torrance is probably one of the better plug-and-play guards or offensive linemen in this class.
Yeah, I agree with that. I definitely agree that Cody Mock has tremendous potential coming from a smaller school with his athletic traits, former tight end. So he's only been playing offensive line for a few years. He's going to have probably a tough transition. That's not only coming from a smaller school, but moving from tackle to guard. But yeah, he could be the best guard on this list in 3 years. He also could be out of football in 3 years. So you gotta have to weigh that. But I have no problem with. I mean, I have no problem with you putting him at 3 over Osiris Torrance. I think that's completely fair and completely reasonable, and might actually make you look really smart in 3 years. So all right, and then we had Chandler Zavala at 5.
Yeah.
So a guy who's kind of going up draft boards now. He was not invited to the combine, but his tape is really good. He tested as a pretty good athlete, if I remember. I believe he had an elite RAS score. So
tested really good.
So
I mean, he comes from a smaller school. He comes from NC State, and it's one of those things where he had some games when they played like bigger schools, like when they played Texas Tech. I thought he played okay. When he played Syracuse, he had like a really good game. But then he had some games that, weren't so good. And I think to some extent, like him in this position is a bit of a projection based on like his highs are really, really high. He got way better year over year. I think he only, he didn't get a whole lot of snaps because of the COVID year, the year before. This year was his full year starting, and I thought it was his best year starting. But, he also had, like, I think Kobe Turner from Wake Forest when they played kind of ate his lunch a little bit. And like you'll see Kobe Turner on my list. I got love for Kobe Turner, so that makes sense. But I just don't think that all things considered, it's the strongest guard class. I got Chandler Zavala here. I mean Zavala here at the 5 spot, but I still think that a third round grade is maybe fair. You could even argue maybe that it's a 4th round grade.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of where I have Zavala. I think I had a 3rd or 4th round grade, something like that. Yeah.
I think his upside is awesome. He's an awesome athlete, and like I said earlier, it's really encouraging when someone is getting better year over year. And on top of that, the strength of his game is his pass pro. I thought he was a much better pass protector than he was a run defender, and that is the way of the world. That's like the way the NFL is going. And if a good pass protector is your floor, it's someone you can take a risk on.
Yeah. Yeah, and guard's an interesting position because, as I mentioned when we were talking about the tackles, a lot of those tackles will end up moving over to guard. So if I was just ranking guards, including some of the tackles that I'd ranked, this list would look very different. I think I'd have Braden Daniels above Zavala probably, maybe Nick Saldiveri too.
Yeah.
So those 2 guys, if they end up moving, I like them a lot of guard, but I wanted to keep them tackle just in this list. But so it's interesting. There's also a couple other guys that I like. I mean, it's tough to only do 5 guys. I mean, I wanted to put Andrew Voorhees on there, but the injury. Such a shame with the injury. I couldn't do it. But I think he's going to be a really good player for a team that gives him some time to recover from that injury. Tyler Steen,
man. Like, Voorhees, he's gonna start next year 24 and a half, and he probably won't start next year because of the injury. It's a shame that it happened when it happened.
Yeah.
I think if he didn't get injured, I honestly, I don't think that maybe other than Peter Skoronski tape-wise, I don't think there's a single person in this class I would have put ahead of him. But man, you have the fact that he went from probably 2 on my list to off the list. I think he played 6 years at USC.
Yeah.
Because of the COVID stuff. I think he's got a lot of experience, but he's also got a lot of wear on the tires. He's gonna be coming off of, what was it, a torn ACL?
I think so, yeah.
He's gonna be coming off a torn ACL when he finally gets a chance to play. And for a light that burned very brightly in his college career at USC, I'm worried about how he'll ever translate to the NFL.
Yeah, it's a shame because he could have come out after last year and probably would have been a 2nd or 3rd round pick. I think he actually had more hype last year than he did in this draft.
He would have been
maybe
younger.
1st round.
I think his tape in 2021 was better.
Yeah, so that's a shame. But I think, if you do draft him in the 4th or 5th round, knowing that this is going to be a redshirt year, maybe he could get on the field at the very end of the year just to get some reps, but that's about it. I think you could be looking at a guy who could come in next year, the year after, and really make a difference. So that might be someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, the Bears are very familiar. The Bears took a risk on a guy like Eddie Jackson that had a season-ending injury in his final year, and he didn't have a great rookie year, even though he made it into training camp a little late. And this next year, he was one of the best safeties in the league. So there's space for it, and they had the same concerns. He came into the league a little older. There's space for it, but it's an uphill battle, and it's probably the reason both of us left him off the list. I mean, we're going to say a very similar thing about a USC prospect on the center list as well.
Yeah. So let's get to center. So this one is probably more to talk about because our rankings are completely different. So I had John Michael Schmitz as the center one. I actually very strongly considered putting Joe Tippmann there, but with Joe Tippmann not testing, I wanted to, but I just couldn't do it. So I kept John Michael Schmitz. Trust your gut. But you had Luke Whippler at 1, who I had at 5. So I'm curious, what you liked about what sold Whippler to you.
I mean, in a nutshell, looked amazing against the competition, against the best competition in college for 2 years in a row. Mm-hmm. He's a better pass protector than he is run defender. I mean, run. Run. Blocker. He's a better pass blocker than he is run blocker, and he's an awesome run blocker. I think he's led on his feet. He tested well as an athlete, and to some extent, I'm kind of at the point where I'm like, I don't understand why people don't like the Whippler tape more, and I would love to hear how he snuck down to 5 for you.
Yeah, I was talking to Tommy Cavanaugh about Whippler not that long ago, and we both kind of had the same thing where it's like we like him, we just didn't love him like anything. It's almost like he does everything well but nothing extraordinary.
Yep.
The one thing I did, not what the one thing, but one thing I do like about Whitler is he's a redshirt sophomore, and you don't see a lot of redshirt sophomore centers. He's only 21 years old. You center. I mean, John Michael Schmitz, I think, is 24. Tippmann's 23. Like usually those guys are older, so he has a lot of room to grow still.
And it takes a lot of game sense to play the position.
Yes. Yeah. That's a very good point. Yeah. It's a position that, you want experience at. So I think that kind of hurt him with me a little bit. He doesn't have that. It's almost like I acknowledge that he has a lot of room to grow because he doesn't have experience, but I also want, if we're drafting a center to potentially start week one, I want a guy with a little bit more experience. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I do think, again, needs to get a little bit stronger, but I don't have like huge concerns about his play strength there. Again, I don't think there was anything particular about his game where I said, oh, he does this poorly. It's just kind of like Matt Bergeron, where I didn't think he did anything extraordinary. He did test really well, which was good to see, and pretty much expected.
That was a big one for me because I was kind of like, okay, like I don't think he ever looked overmatched against the competition he played at Ohio State. Like pretty consistently the best teams in the league. And then when he went out and tested as an elite athlete, I was like, man, like it seems to me that you could argue ceiling, which might be an annoying term, but ceiling is about as high as it gets with Luke Whitler, man.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm gonna regret putting him at 5 in like a year.
I tell you what, I saw the list now. I literally almost messaged you and said, "How you put him over Ricky Stromberg right now?"
Well, Ricky Stromberg tested as a better athlete. If we're just talking about guys testing as that, like I think he had like a 9. He almost had like a 9.9. But yeah. Let's see. I have it up right now.
I think Luke Whitler. I'm gonna look it up. Whitler was a 9.3.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. Okay, he had 9.57, so not a 9.9, but still pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't love Ricky Stromberg's tape either. I honestly, now that we're like talking this through, I don't know why I had Stromberg over.
Well, no,
but I'm gonna stick with my guns. And
it's one of those things where it's like I think from as far as like he would probably be 6 for me. Okay. Like devil's advocate here, like to fight your argument. He's a very, very good pass blocker. At least. I think he had what we kind of talked about, that sense about where his leverage is and where he can get help. I think he did a good job, being able to play into his guards, and I think he was a better run blocker than he was pass blocker, which is encouraging. He's also another guy that, correct me if I'm wrong, he's like what, 21 years old, 22?
I don't know. Maybe I don't have that right in front of me. But yeah, another thing. So another reason why
22 years old.
Another reason I had Whitler a little bit lower is I think that I had the 4 guys in front of him, I think, can play guard in a pinch.
Yep.
And I don't think Whitler has that in him. I think he's center only, which if you're going to be a center only prospect, there's nothing wrong with that, but you better blow me away with your tape. And he was good. He just didn't blow me away. Like John Michael Schmitz, I think
frame-wise, he probably could play guard. But the thing is, and like you said, it's a little bit rare that he showed up to Ohio State and just started for center for them, like basically since he got there. He got a couple of snaps as a redshirt freshman, and then after that, he was their starter for 2 straight years, and then he declared.
Yeah, he's also got the 31, the sub 32-inch arms. Also scared me a little bit.
Yeah, that's tuck that guy inside and forget him on type territory.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying he's like center only. So, but I do think all 5 of I like this center class a lot. I think some people were like down on this center class. I like it a lot. I thought this was a really hard group to rank. I had a couple other guys that I really wanted to put in my top 5, but I couldn't do it just because all 5 of these guys are really good.
The strongest offensive line group in the class, I think.
I think so too.
Although
so that was
our top 5 at the guard position is like, you pretty much couldn't leave the draft with any of those being unhappy. But I think like it took me a lot to not put John Michael Schmitz at the start. His tape is awesome. He moves so smoothly. He especially considering what the Bears have leaked in that 1920 football drive thing, what they look for in offensive linemen. I think they're probably in love with John Michael Schmitz. We heard today that they sent 2 people to the Joe Tippmann Pro Day, pretty much specifically for Joe Tippmann, which totally makes sense. I think his tape is awesome.
He moves so well for a guy his size, 6'6". You don't see a lot of 6'6" centers, but he moves so well.
20, I think he's about heavier than most of the guys in this class.
Yeah, I mean, he moves so well. He's so quick out of his stance. I mean, the Bears don't have their centers pull a lot, but he is the best pulling center in this class. The way he gets out in space is incredible. So I really wanted to rank him at 1, but I just couldn't do it just because I don't know. I know he's athletic, but he didn't test, so
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. But
The
I
only
really
thing
wanted
that's
to.
a little bit disheartening too is I think that the Bears, and it's probably the reason that I think they chilled out a little on like how they're approaching the tackle position because they didn't want to have to take a shot out of desperation. Is that I think the Bears were looking at the way that you build a line is like you add, you can either like the two real benefits are adding a lot of talent, and then continuity, like having people consistently have been there and know the system and have worked together. And because of that, I think that they're very likely going to be dead set on starting Cody Whitehair at that center position. And it would lead me to believe that maybe it'll push centers a little bit farther down their board, even though I did, we've already said that like you do want to draft for 2024, not 2023.
Mhm.
But if they take a John Michael Schmitz or a Joe Tittman or a Luke Weipler or even an Olu Oluwatimi, like you could say, hey, Cody Whitehair, depending on how they feel about Nate Davis, has a spot at either of those guards positions anyway. But
Yeah.
I mean, it is unfortunate because I think this is probably the most talented like class or position in the class for offensive line.
Yeah. Interestingly, last year the Eagles took Cam Jurgens in the second round, a center who I really liked. I liked him a lot. But they took him in the second round despite having Jason Kelsey,
And just
and
re-signed Kelsey too.
they just re-signed Kelsey. So if they're looking at that kind of blueprint, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to draft
Grab
one
him
of these
stash.
guys and let him sit for a year. I don't know if you're going to do that with John Michael Schmitz. I think he's pretty pro ready, but Tittman might be a guy who probably needs a little bit more season. It wouldn't be a bad idea or maybe you draft Tittman and he can be the backup at center and both guard positions. So kind of have that, and then next year he's your starting center. So that is definitely a direction I could see them going.
Want to talk to me about Olu?
Yeah, I like Olu. Again, when I first had this, I had him lower, and I decided just to, I said because people just keep telling me, he needs to be lower, and I just said screw it. I like the tape. I'm keeping
Yeah,
him
I
at
like
3.
the tape too. And honestly, like we said, I think less important is pass blocking as a center than as it is as a tackle, specifically because you have so many people to rely on. There's so much dynamic between you being in a phone booth and you being able to play off your players. And I think he'll grow as a pass blocker. I think his game sense is awesome, and I think he's one of the like his job in the run game is one of the best in the class.
Yeah. Yeah, and he just has a ton of experience. I mean, this guy is a 5-year starter, essentially, at center for Virginia and then Michigan. So he's got a ton of experience. He knows how to play the position. I don't think his ceiling is super high because he's not the greatest athlete, but I just think he's going to be a solid center for a very long time in this league. So I had a hard time ranking him below Stromberg, who I think has a much lower floor than other two.
And honestly, I would say that like he verges on having a higher upside as well. But it's one of those things where, like, how much do you value tape versus like a combine performance and versus like an upside and like a projection kind of thing?
Sure. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, it's tough. You got to weigh all that stuff. So it's, so it's tough. So we'll find out in 3 years, like if we were right or wrong. All right. Do you want to talk about Patterson or do you want to, anyone else you like wanted to rank here?
Let me bring up my board.
I have one guy that I really wanted to rank here, and I found him late. I mean, I heard of him obviously, but I didn't really get to his tape today. That's Jake Andrews from Troy.
Jake Andrews. So the people that missed my list: Jake Andrews, Juice Scruggs, who I think a lot of people are higher on than me. But honestly, that was one of those ones where, and it'll come out in my opinion of Tyree Rolson as well. That was one of those ones where I was like, okay, like maybe. It seemed to me that every time, like, he flashed, but like the more opportunity he got, I don't think that he did better. And honestly, I think maybe he like kind of like maybe regressed a little bit. I think that the Juice Scruggs thing is a little bit of a projection on like him being a good athlete. I think he's a better athlete than like a Jake Andrews or like an Oluwatimi. But I would say that I think we both agree that, I mean, I guess you don't because you have him at 5, but I kind of felt like Tittman, Schmitz, and Weipler were in their own tier, and then everyone else was past them. But I really think that Jarrett Patterson has a lot of upside. Well, first off, this was his worst year in college, I thought. And it was the first year they didn't make him play center. I thought he had 2 years at center before this where he looked really, really good. And I think if he had been able to stay at center this year, he would have been one of the best centers in this class. He got moved to, I believe, right guard this year and honestly looked pretty okay. From a guard point of view, if you were just evaluating him as a guard, for me, he would have been at that 7 or 8 spot on the guard list. And like we were saying, the guard and the center position is probably stronger than the tackle position of this list. But his tape as a center against some of the tougher competition, like because without a division, Notre Dame gets some of those tough competition, tough games every year. I thought his tape was awesome. I thought he tested like a great athlete, and I think that someone, if they take him and let him play home as a center in this league, I think that Jared Patterson's going to be a great pro.
Yeah, I agree with you. I liked his center tape a lot better than his guard tape. I mean, he's probably a guy who can play guard in a pinch, but I'm glad I have him as a center as well. I didn't make him my top 5, but I also have him as a center who can play guard in a pinch. But I think that's his best position. Yeah, I tested better than I thought he did. I thought he tested so. He didn't test like elite, but like pretty good for him.
Are you looking at his RAS?
Yeah, it's 7.28, which I think is a good score for him.
Yeah,
like it's not elite, but I expected him to test worse, so I think it's pretty good.
No, I know. I think now that we're thinking about RAS, exactly, I just kind of thought about this. I think we would be remiss to not mention that John Gaines at the guard position is probably going to find himself a really nice home in the professional league, and if he can develop some of his technique, that guy's a freak.
Yeah, his tape is rough at times for sure, but yeah, athletic freak and definitely
space. I think he does a really, really good job. Nobody wants to see him. No cornerback or linebacker wants to see him barreling down. He probably could be a better pass protector.
Yeah, he was a guy who I considered like putting at like 9 or 10 or something. Like he was definitely in that like discussion for myself. So yeah, definitely that's a good shout out for a guy to kind of look out for. So yeah, but my 6th center was Jake Andrews. I really actually wanted to put him 5, but I could not put him over Whippler.
If you
there's no way.
Top 5, we would have had an issue.
I think originally I had Stromberg and Whippler flipped, and I thought about putting Andrews over Stromberg, but I could do it. But I just wanted to give him a shout out because I really like him. He plays with really good leverage, really good hand use, adjusts his hands really well, does really good hand fighting. So I think he's going to be a guy. I think he is going to be a good pro. For a long time, but couldn't put him
another guy that I think, as far as like where you can play him, I think that he like translates. Like I honestly don't think it would be crazy if in a pinch you needed him to play tackle for you. He's a little bit light maybe on that side, but he played some guard he plays Troy, right? He played Troy, guard at Troy that I thought he looked maybe even better than his center tape.
Yeah, I think he might have even played tackle early on in his career, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, no, I love the Jake Andrews. I think we both agree that if we had a 6th spot here, he'd be there.
Yeah.
We should say, honest to God, tape wise, it's the same thing as Andrew Voorhees. Unfortunately, Brett Nealon, the center from USC, dude. Honest to God, I think one of the better centers in this class. I think maybe a little undersized. I don't even know if he's 290 pounds, but he's like, I think he's like a 3 or 4 year starter. He's not one of those guys because of COVID that played like 3 or 4 years starting. And in his bowl game, I think he tore his Achilles. And I think because of that, I think he's said in some interviews that maybe he'll be able to get back for training camp. I'm a little bit doubtful on that. I think maybe it makes more sense that maybe he would like come in halfway into his first year. And if you miss your training camp in your first year as an offensive line rookie, you're probably just going to miss your whole first year. But he played against some pretty tough competition. And I thought like if he hadn't got injured, like, man, honestly, like I think he might have pushed Tippmann down my list. I think he would have been at 3 for me.
Yeah, I really liked his tape too. I was just looking up. So yeah, he was 6'1" and 5/8, 286 pounds. So really undersized, but honestly, I thought tape was really good.
That more on 100%, and it's again one of those things where he probably played close to 2,500, 3,000 college snaps. Like he's really experienced, what you want at your center position. Obviously, it gives you less room to grow because you're probably approaching your potential a little bit more, but you want your center to be experienced.
For sure. All right, you ready to move on to edge?
Yeah, we're
Let's
already
do
an
it.
hour in. Let's grind.
We're going way over. It's
Yeah, we
happening.
are. Go.
But okay. So edge. So we obviously have the same top guy. Chris, we disagree with Chris Sims, who had Will Anderson as past edge rusher number 5.
Whoa.
That's just crazy. But we decided to put him at 1 because we're not
The thing
idiots.
that's annoying about that is anybody worth their weight in salt knows that Chris Sims doesn't think that.
Yeah,
He's
no,
just
that's
being a
definitely
brat.
just a look at me, I'm different ranking.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is.
Now,
And he does that every year.
Will Anderson got, I think he's top 5 all time in the NCAA as far as career sacks. He started as a redshirt freshman on probably consistently the most talented team in America, and he looked like it. He can defend the run. Sometimes I think they played him out of position and like where he was lining up in 5 tech and like shadowing the tackle and still looked totally fine. His get off the line, I think, is, if it's not the best in the class, whoever's best in the class is some dude that weighs 230 pounds. Like, his tape is extremely exciting. I think aside from someone named Jalen Carter, he's the best defender in the class, and I think he's the best. Aside from someone named Jalen Carter, I think he's the best player in the class. He's going to make someone a great impact early on. I don't know if he's a generational player like one of the Bosas or like a Von Miller.
But I agree with that, yeah.
I think from a pass rushing point of view, he's going to come to the league, maybe not instantly, but pretty early on, be better than someone like a Jadeveon Clowney ever was. Like, he really is that talented. Yeah. He's not a one-trick pony. He's not just too fast. You can make that argument about some other guys in this class, maybe. He's got some pass rush moves. Will Anderson is going to make someone very, very happy.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting because I think he's a guy who plays, a lot of these like top pick pass rushers, you had questioned like their motor and everything. That's not a question with Will Anderson. I think almost people hold that against him because he has such a high motor and he's always around the football that people almost hold that against him and say like, oh, he's getting, cleanup sacks and stuff like that. But that's a good thing that he's doing that. So but I agree with you. I don't think he's a Bosa, but he's not going to be a 20 sack a year guy. He might not even be a 15 sack a year guy, but he's going to be a double-digit sack guy. And a lot of years of his career is going to be really good. Good against the run too. Despite being a little smaller, he's still good against the run.
Honestly, like I think he like his. I have to look at his arm length, but his ability to sit on a block and then shed when it comes time to make the tackle is incredible for someone that's a little bit more undersized. Legitimately, if he wasn't allowed to rush the passer at the NFL level his entire career, you could argue he still deserves to be a top 3 round pick because of how like nuanced he was in the run defense game.
Yeah, 100%.
He was one of the better run defenders in the class, which is funny because you'll see as we kind of go on through this list, some of these undersized guys like kind of prove to be a little bit better against the run than maybe some of these bigger guys you thought would be there.
I was going to say my number 2, Nolan Smith, who's sub 240 pounds, I think is one of the better run defenders in this list. I think he sets the edge better than Tyree Wilson does. I think he sets the edge better than Van Ness does. Maybe Murphy, probably not Murphy. Maybe on par with Murphy, but Murphy's also got 40 pounds on him. So I really like Nolan Smith a lot. I think he still has a lot of room to grow as a pass rusher, but he's got the bend, he's got the athleticism. I think he's going to be a much more productive NFL player than he was a college player. When you watch Georgia and the same kind of thing with Jalen Carter, when you watch Georgia, they're asking their defensive linemen to 2-gap. And neither of those two players are going to be in a 2-gapping scheme in the NFL. Nolan Smith's going to be in a 1-gap, maybe as a 3-4 linebacker, maybe as a 4-3. And Jalen Carter, too. He's not going to be 2-gapping often in the next level. You're going to want these guys to shoot gaps and get in the backfield as quickly as possible. But they both proved that they could do that when asked. So that's what I really like about both their tapes is they did what their defensive coordinators were asking of them, even if it isn't going to be what they're doing in the NFL. So I think both those guys going to be really good. You had him at 3. You had one with Myles Murphy at 2. I can't really argue with that. If we're talking about best get-offs, I think Myles Murphy has to be in that conversation. His burst off the line is crazy.
I just don't see how Smith holds up against NFL tackles. Yeah, you know what? You don't want to get into the conversation of like comparing people to people that are kind of like them because it feels like every year someone comes out like a Kalijah Cansey or a Ed Oliver that you want to compare to like an Aaron Donald and say, well, it's doable. But people probably had the same concerns about a Micah Parsons, and Micah Parsons still looks like a man amongst boys in the NFL, where people thought he was a little bit undersized and maybe a speed rusher coming out of the league as well. I think that Nolan Smith has I don't even want to say flashed, because there's not a whole lot of bad on his tape. He really does do the things you'd want to see him do at the college level. He did it against the best competition in the league. In the country. He did it on one of the best teams in the country and kept other really good players on the bench. And I just think that I have Miles Murphy there, and we can get into why I think Miles Murphy is starting to get a little bit slept on. But Nolan Smith, I think, is going to be a great pro.
Yeah, I mean, to address Alan's concerns, I saw Nolan Smith hold up against college tackles, so in the SEC. So I don't have a huge concern. I mean, obviously it's a jump competition. His lack of play weight is going to be an issue in the NFL. But I saw him hold up against college offensive tackles better than other guys on this list, despite them being 260. So if you're going to have a concern about Nolan Smith, that's perfectly fine. But then you should also have a concern about Lucas Van Ness or Tyree Wilson, if at that point. Yep. Because and the other thing about Nolan Smith is people do get caught up on his weight and like, oh, is he going to be able to hold up against NFL tackles, which is a legit question. I think he's going to be fine, but it's a legit question that you need to ask. But here's the thing: he's also one of the best pass rushers in this list. So even he doesn't have to be a great run defender to be a very valuable NFL player. I think he's
not a bad run defender.
And he's not a bad run defender. So all of that together, I think, I wish he were 250, just like getting to that threshold of 250, but he was at 238 of the combine. I think he was at 240 at his pro day. If he could get to 245, I think he'll be absolutely fine.
100%. It's a shame we didn't get to see a full season from him. I think he ended the season injured, or at least he missed 4 or 5 games in the middle of the year because of it.
Yep, as Rose points out.
He tore his pec.
So he wasn't really able to work out. So yeah, that is a good point. I don't know if it's going to be, it might not get above 250, but he probably played in the 240s.
I feel like he could play the Al-Qadin role. If he is even close to Al-Qadin as a pro, it's a total bump.
Yeah,
it's a failure. Al-Qadin had his moment, but I don't think they're very similar players at all. I think, again, you kind of have to look towards like a Micah Parsons, who, to be fair, Micah Parsons came into the league at 250, and that that 10 pounds does make a difference. And it's that's the kind of the difference between and it's the concerns you'll have with someone like a Will McDonald or a Nolan Swift over like a Will Anderson, where their get off and their play speed is their benefit. But I think Will Anderson will probably test it in around that 250 range as well.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of a difference, but
I think a good comp for Nolan Smith is Hassan Reddick.
Yeah. I feel like
I think that's just. I mean, everyone goes to that comp just because I think there's not a better comp in this class. And if you're drafting Nolan Smith in the top 8, top 9, top 10, whatever you think he's going to go, you're doing it because of Hassan Reddick. You think he's going to be Hassan Reddick. So I think it makes sense.
Thing is the way he tested. What was his 10-yard split was like a 1. It was in the 1.4s.
Hold up.
The thing is,
we're already committing to go way over time, so let's take the time to look it up. All right, so Nolan Smith, 9.23 RAS score, 1.47 10-yard split, which is the best 10-yard split from an edge defender.
It's 10.0.
It's 10.0.
Yeah, so I'm saying you can compare him to all the people you want in the NFL, but to some extent, some players are kind of, mold breakers. And if he can even add 5 pounds, basically, and base that on the way that we've seen him be a technician in some of the situations where he's a little undersized but can still defend against the run. Nolan Smith is going to make someone really, really happy if they get him. If you get him outside of the top 10, man.
Yeah, he was 240 at his pro day, so up from his combine. So 240s, that's undersized for sure, but it's not egregiously undersized. And when you run a 4.39 and have a 1.47 10-yard split and are an elite athlete coupled with elite tape, I think people are kind of overthinking him a little bit. So that's why I had him at 2. You had him at 3, so you're not much lower on him. But let's talk about Miles Murphy now, because I like Miles Murphy too. I had him a little bit lower, but I think, especially after his combine or his pro day, his pro day where he absolutely dominated, he's kind of moving back up boards, which I think is good. I think
Yeah,
I had him below Lucas Van Ness for a while, but I think I've come around there, and I put him up.
Word on the street is that he played 2022 fairly injured, and that he was never really full health going into the year. I think the year before he looked a lot better, and I think like where he flashed in 2022 in the COVID season was like kind of the things that you love about Miles Mercy. But he's a freak. Not only is he a freak, but I think he's got like the moves that you see really, really win at the NFL, like speed to power, straight arms, the rip move. Like I think his arsenal is about as good as you want like someone his size to be. But like the word freak is just gonna get thrown around so much because he is. Like if he's not 275, he's probably 265. He can bend the edge, he can run through you, he's a good run defender. I think people are starting to sleep on Miles Murphy, man. Like, I don't think he's like, what is he, 21, 22 years old?
Yeah, he's young. I believe he was a redshirt sophomore. But yeah, everything you said, I agree with. The reason I had him a little bit lower is my biggest concern with him is too many times he gets stonewalled by a tackle, which happens to all defensive ends. You know, it happens, and he just doesn't have the counter. He doesn't really have a pass rush plan. If he has some really good first moves, and those work a lot, and he's able to get a sack or get a pressure. But if that first move doesn't work, the rep's over.
Yeah.
The rep's over. So that's why I had him a little bit lower. I mean, but at the same time, I mean, I have those same concerns about Tyree Wilson, Louis Van Ness, all these guys. And Miles Murphy had a 9.7 RAS score with long arms. So I agree with you. I think he's a hell of a player. And like I said, if we're talking, one of the biggest things I value from an edge rusher is burst and get off. And I think his is the best in the class. I think him and Will Anderson but I think Murphy edges him out.
Okay, can we talk about Will McDonald, bro?
Yes, we can talk about Will McDonald.
What does he need to do?
Will McDonald.
I'll almost say, okay, you would agree he was used egregiously.
Yes.
He was over the tackle, even inside the tackle, like almost more often than he was outside the tackle.
Yeah, Iowa State runs that 3-3-5.
The tape of him being outside the tackle is like some of the best edge rushing tape in the class.
Maybe I should have put it top 10. So yeah, Iowa State runs that 3-3-5. So he's playing, basically like a 5 technique, which is not where he's going to play.
Psycho.
The reason I didn't have him in this list is I've been burned so many times by quick, speedy, bendy pass rushers with no power. He doesn't have power. He has no power. Before too many times, and I can't do it again. I've just been burned so many times by that same exact profile. It's a physical game. You need to play with more power than Will McDonald does. It's not just a run defense thing. It's like people will hear that and say, oh, he's not a great run defender. It is what it is. But he also doesn't have a lot of power when we're talking about pass rushing. He wins with his bend and he does have the long arm, but it's not so much power to push them back. It's more just to keep them disengaged and then turn the corner. But I don't feel like he plays with enough power in both the pass and the run game where I feel comfortable drafting him super high.
Yeah,
I mean, him and Nolan Smith are about the same size. So I mean, size is clearly not the issue. It's the skill set more than anything.
My thing, I guess. Here's the thing: is I think if Nolan Smith tested the same as Will McDonald's tape is better than Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith probably is surprisingly better against the run. I think that's probably the reason Nolan Smith is where he is, because I actually don't think he's got a weak point in his game. I'd agree with you that Will McDonald isn't as good against the run as he probably needs to be. But by the same merit, I would say that if he had played the entire time on the outside of the tackles, we'd be talking about him completely differently. I actually think that his speed to power is better than people give him credit for. I fully think his pass rushing reps in this class. I'm actually really high on BJ Ojulari. I think BJ Ojulari's kit is probably one of the best in this class. Like as far as like having all the moves. Like I think Tyree Wilson doesn't have all the moves. Lucas Van Ness doesn't have all the moves. Zach Harrison doesn't have all the moves. Felix Anudike-Uzomah has some stuff, and I think Tuli. I would butcher that if I tried to pronounce it in a second. Yeah, I agree. And honestly, this is a fairly strong class. I said this, that ranking the defensive tackles and ranking the edges are it was like kind of like pick your flavor. There's a bunch of different like really intriguing aspects about them. But like from a straight like outside the tackle, like literally the edge rushing point of view, maybe Will Anderson's tape is better. Like I thought Will McDonald is from straight pass rushing point of view was probably the best pass rusher in this class, if not, the second best behind Will Anderson.
You're probably right. Like I said, I've just been burned by that profile too many times. And you mentioned BJ Ojulari, and I obviously have Ojulari at 7. So they are similar players.
Yep.
I thought BJ Ojulari did a much better job converting speed to power. I think actually Ojulari was one of the better pass rushers converting speed to power in this list. Because when he gets that long arm into your chest, you're getting back into the quarterback. And I just didn't see that. I saw great pass rush ability from Will McDonald. I just didn't see that exact speed to power that he's going to need at the NFL level.
I'd like to.
I'm probably going to look really stupid for not putting him in a top 10.
I don't know if
acknowledge
he ever be like a 16, 17, 18 sack guy, but I think he has the tools to be. And I think if he can enter, like I think if someone like the Eagles get him, man.
I think you have to be more creative with him than Nolan Smith. I think Nolan Smith can more line up in a traditional edge role, where McDonald, you really want to move him around, get him on mismatches, and kind of have a package for him almost. So yeah, a team like the Eagles that he can come in.
Is that Nolan Smith exists? Is that the things that you love about Will McDonald? You can go to Nolan Smith and go, well, actually, he does them all better. But it's like, Will McDonald tested as a 9.6 in his RAS score. He's got almost 35-inch arms. Like, I really do think that he's going to develop into being, and like, I think he's got a sophisticated pass rush kit. I will say that he's probably not as strong, but if he can add a little bit of strength, because he is almost 6'4", if he can add a little bit of strength and muscle to that frame, he's got the length to do the stuff that you love from a Miles Murphy and a Zach Harrison, where he grabs the inside of your chest and just keeps running you into it. Because explosion-wise, like, he's jumping 36 inches in the air. He's got a broad jump of like 11. Maybe this is like a projection versus a production thing, which is like pretty much the bane of the NFL draft. But I'm a Will McDonald believer.
Hey, I don't blame you. I mean, I think 4 is a little high. If I could, maybe you could talk me probably into the top 10. I think 4 is a little high, but I don't blame you. I mean, he's definitely got some impressive reps on tape. I was just looking to see. I also have Dane Brugler's guide up because he just released that this week. So I was curious where he had him. He had him at 8, so he was in between. He kind of split the difference between us.
Who's his top 10?
All right, we'll go through it. So he's got Will Anderson at 1, Tyree Wilson at 2, Lucas Van Ness at 3, Nolan Smith at 4, Miles Murphy at 5, BJ Ojulari at 6, Felix Anaduke-Azuma at 7, Will McDonald at 8, Keon White at 9, and Derek Hall at 10.
Derek Hall, man, he could have made the list. Derek Hall is another guy with a really sophisticated like pass rush kit. He's from Auburn. He tested well as a good athlete. I think Derek Hall, I don't know how much he's going to be great against the run in the NFL.
Yeah.
But I think like if he goes to a team, kind of like we talked about with some of the offensive tackle, if he goes to a team where he doesn't need to be the guy in his first year, he can develop into a really, really great player.
Yeah, and Rice has the question here. I agree. He probably would have been like 11, 12, 13, something like he just missed this. He was definitely in consideration, 100%. I really struggled with that like 10th spot. I was like, I don't know who to put here. And because I think there's a drop off after Felix Anaduke there. So Derek Hall was in contention. I think Hall's frame is very maxed out, and he's stiff as you mentioned here. Not super bendy, but good enough. I think that's perfect. He's just kind of stiff, and his frame is maxed out. So I don't see him really having that much upside. I think he could be a situational pass rusher and a guy who can get you 5, 6 sacks a year. But I think that's probably where he tops out at. So I just think the upside's a little limited. That's why he didn't make my top 10. Whereas Foskey, Felix, and Harrison here, who are 8, 9, and 10 for me, all have elite athleticism and have that potential to be a double-digit sack a year guy down the road.
All right, talk to me about Tyree Wilson.
Tyree Wilson? All
because
right.
I'm low on him. I got him at 5, and honestly, like I don't know any reason why I should have put him ahead of Lucas Van Ness.
I probably should have had him at 6. I don't know if I
You,
could. I think to
I
some extent
mean,
when you talk about tiers, like I kind of have like the 7 below as in that next tier of like. Honestly, I think that like Ojolari and Tuli Tui Pelotu are maybe better technicians than almost every guy above them. But like you want to talk about ceilings and stuff like that. But I really, man, I just like people are like, okay, this is what like Tyree Wilson could be. And it's like, okay, well
mhm,
then where was it? Like I
yeah,
know he
that's.
flashed, and I think when he had his opportunity to straight rush from the edge, he was actually pretty crafty. But from a snap to snap basis, I don't even think he dominated the competition he played against in college.
I think that's completely fair. But it's again, we going back to the conversation we've been having. It's are you ranking these guys on what they are now or what they're going to be in 3 years? And you have to weigh that with everyone. And I think Tyree Wilson has the potential in 3 years to be better than all the guys on the list, maybe even Will Anderson. But he also has the potential to be out of the league, like the other guy we were talking
Yeah,
about. So
I
I
love the
think,
person. Every interview
yeah,
he's done, he
I
said all the
mean,
right things. He seems like he's got his head on right, and like he's a
it,
flash guy.
yeah, I mean, it
The
just
best tape he's got is like up with the best tape in the class.
I mean, it also comes down to if you're building an edge rusher in a lab, you're making them
It's
6'5"
Tyree
and a half,
Wilson.
271 pounds with 36-inch arms. Like that's what it is.
36-inch arms,
Uh,
man.
35 and 5/8, but I gave him the extra
Yeah,
couple of
the 3
eighths of
years,
an inch there.
whatever.
What did he test at? Did he test? I didn't even know if I looked this up. No, I didn't test. But I mean, he's obviously clearly a very athletic person when you watch him.
No,
Um,
I mean I had him above Lucas Van Ness, even though I kind of consider them similar in that like it's a
mm,
projection. Lucas Van Ness more because of how little he was used. He tested
yeah,
amazingly, and then when he was used correctly, not as a 3 tech, not as a 5 tech. I saw Gabe Gabriel say that he thinks he makes more sense as a 3 tech, and I said I wanted to comp. Gabe Gabriel is such a funny person in Bears Twitter because it's like, yo, he
it's
worked in
fucking
the
insane.
NFL. The guy, it's like, okay, like he gets it, but then he says some shit. And you're like, are you fucking kidding? The
I
tape,
think
the tape of Lucas Van Ness on the inside is by far his worst tape. When he
I
gets
agree.
outside the tackle, maybe even 5 tech, but even then, when he gets outside the tackle and can take 3 or 4 steps before he's engaged, he's such an issue. No one would argue that his bull rush is his best move, maybe his only move, but he can definitely develop like more of a kit, and he's like what, like a 9.8 athlete.
Yeah, he tested crazy. Yeah, I agree with you. I didn't like his tape inside. So Alan has the question here about White and Van Ness projecting this 3 technique. I think White has a better chance as a
Yeah,
three
he's not
technique.
on my list because I think he's a defensive tackle.
That's fair. That's fair. I probably should have put him there too. But just in regards of Lucas Van Ness, I agree. His best reps were on the edge. His only pass rush move, I'm willing to say it, is a bull rush. That's
Yeah,
really all he does right now. Every single rep is I'm going to bull rush you and you're going to try and defend it, but you won't be able to half the time. And that's what his entire tape is like from on a snap by snap basis when rushing from the edge. And he got away with that in college because there, a few times a game he would just overpower people. He's going to need to develop his pass rush moves in the NFL. There's no way around it. But he's got the athleticism and the frame to do that. So
no,
that's
hundred
kind of
percent.
again
And
another
like
guy.
to some extent, it's like his move being that bull rush move, being the athlete and the size that he is. There are some opportunities where even at the NFL level, you can know dead to rights what he's doing going into the snap, and
Yeah.
still he's going to get his hands on your chest and absolutely tower you over. Like
Mhm.
we said that offensive line, the best tape in the class is probably Peter Skoronski. And there were a handful of tapes that Lucas Van Ness made Peter Skoronski look like a grade 8.
Yeah.
Like legit, like it
I
is that good, but it's that jump
Lucas
where
Van
go ahead.
the Lucas Van Ness versus Peter Skoronsky game, Iowa versus Northwestern, is why is when I originally said Peter Skoronsky's a guard
Yeah,
because he struggled with Lucas Van Ness's length
100%.
a lot. So yeah.
No, I think Lucas Van
Uh,
Ness is like, even if he is a one trick pony, his one trick can absolutely make him a career in the NFL. Like you look at someone like a Robert Quinn, totally different players, but Robert Quinn made a career just doing the hop chop.
yeah.
So you can,
So
if
true.
your move is good, especially at the athlete that Lucas Van Ness is, you can be fine. But I just have my doubts that he'll develop, the other moves where he can use them situationally to become more than what he is there. So that's why
I
I
agree.
have him at 6.
Yeah,
Now
that's kind of what I thought about 5.
we're both really high on Zach Harrison and B.J. Ojulari. We kind of talked about B.J. Ojulari. B.J. Ojulari, I think, completely different than Lucas Van Ness.
Yeah.
B.J.
Yes.
Ojulari, really, really refined pass rush kit. Has a bunch of different moves. He can do a bull rush. He can do a hop chop. He can do a swim move. He can do a spin move. He can beat you inside. And on top of that, I think he does a really, really, really good job of using them correctly. Not like saying, okay,
Yes.
this is what I'm going to do this move. I think he takes 2 steps and sees the distance and space where like his tackles are, where the guard is, and what his options are, and then does his moves. And because of that, like I think he should be a good pass rusher at the NFL level for a long time because he's not a bad athlete. I just don't know if I don't because of I don't know if he's ever going to be the dominant pass rusher.
Yeah, I think I love the way you said that. Is because he has all the tools in the toolkit, but he also knows when to use them, and he doesn't go into pre-snap like, okay, I'm going to bull rush this guy.
Yeah,
he reacts to what the offensive tackle is doing. If they flash their hands quick, if they overset, he goes inside. He reacts to kind of what the play situation calls for. So that's why I liked him too. So yeah, I think he is being a little underrated. Interestingly, he had a really bad pro day.
I know,
but I think reports were that he was injured because I think he ran like a 7.5 3-cone drill, which if you watch him play one game, that that time is not correct. So I'm not putting much
shame
stock
about
into that.
Is that we're moving him down the board because he ran a 7.5 3-cone and Zach Harrison ran a 7.6.
Did he really?
Yeah, not great.
Well, I mean, that's actually not that surprising because if there is one weakness to Zach Harrison's tape, it's that he's not bendy and he's
not very quick.
He struggles to get around the edge, but he's a very linear athlete, which makes complete sense.
The thing that's fine about that is that I think that he's got a little bit more to his toolkit than Lucas Van Ness because like they're kind of similar in that they're going to get their hands on you and then try and go through you.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if he wins the hand fight at the point of contact, I think I'm surprised this 3-cone was that bad. Like it's kind of in that like
I got him at a 7.33 according to Raz.
Oh, okay.
Which isn't good, but it's not.
No, but it's kind of more okay. Perfect. That's more in like that's like more into like a Zadarius Smith kind of category or like okay, but either way, like Zach Harrison, 36, almost 37-inch arms. He's a good athlete. Maybe he's not the quickest, but also I think his explosion testing, like his jumping, was actually pretty good.
Yeah, it was very good. 34.5-inch vertical, over 10 foot in the broad.
Yep.
Very good. It's interesting to me that like Tyree Wilson is being talked about as this top 10 prospect, where Zach Harrison is bigger, longer arms, more athletic, and played at a tougher competition. I don't think Zach Harrison's as good as Tyree Wilson. I just think there's interesting why it's such a huge gap that people.
That's kind of my thing. I see people putting like Byron Young from Tennessee, who I like. He's good. Yeah. But he's not better than Zach Harrison, I don't think, at least not at a professional level. And I thought that Zach Harrison, again, like you said, was going up against the best competition in the country. I thought when he had a one-on-one pass rush, it was actually so rare that he lost. It's not that he has a whole lot of pass rush moves, but because of the way, because of his frame and because of the tools that he has, he really only needs to have 2 moves. He can beat some people that set their feet early around the edge, and if they don't set their feet early and they try and commit too much to going around the edge, he'll just put his hand on your chest and walk you back. He really does have like enough of a toolkit to be able to benefit like the traits that he has, and I thought that like he's just a bit of a clutch player. Like I just thought the times when he was making his play, he was great. He's a great player on the ball. Like his sacks turned into fumbles more than I thought anyone else in the class did. I thought his sacks came in moments when like you go and look at them, they're almost always 1-score games. They're almost always late in the game. Like Zach Harrison is a guy that I've said this for like 4 months now that if he's there with one of the Bears' second round picks or like that early third round pick, I would love the Bears to take him.
Absolutely. And if we're talking about a guy who fits what the Bears want, like it's Zach Harrison. I feel like he's just I feel like Eberflus is going to fall in love with him. So if he's there, that'd be great. Also a guy who got better each and every year.
Yep. Completely agree.
Got better in almost every facet of his game from 2021 to 2022. He was better against the run. He was a better pass rusher. He learned how to use his length. He had 36-inch arms, but he wasn't really using them, early in his career.
No.
Now he's using them more. Against the run, I think it was the biggest difference that I saw in the tape.
Oh.
He was getting turned around in 2021, but now he's staying square to the line. Like I like him a lot.
And like backside plays, when like the play is like, okay, we're basically going to run away from Zach Harrison. Like we're going to leave him unblocked, but the whole play is going to the right, so we should be fine. His get off and his ability to make it to that play before they get around the tackle on the other side, like, dude, I feel like Zach Harrison is being criminally slept on today. We had a conversation, me and you both had a conversation today with Robert Smith about it. Like, I don't think I've said this, and like it's kind of that stereotype. Oh, there's no way he makes it out of the second round. Well, it's like, yo, listen, a bunch of people are going to make it out of the second round. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But he's being mocked and he's being like ranked way lower than I think the rest of the league is on him, or at least should be on him.
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of it also is just it's a deep edge class. So like I was just looking up because I was curious where Dane Brugler had him. He had him at 13, but he has a third round grade on him, which isn't that much lower than what we would have. You're talking about drafting him in the late second round. So it's just, I mean, he's got 12 guys. He's got 11 guys with at least a second round grade. So it's tough to stand out in this edge class.
Yep.
We
both had.
That's funny. I like that. Zach Harrison is Kirkland's signature. Tyree Wilson.
We both had Amadou Uzama at 9.
9, yeah, a solid player. Another guy. I mean, Kansas State also ran that 3.35 that like Iowa State did. So he was also playing out of position, which I think hurt him. But I don't know. I know a lot of people really like him, and I do too. I clearly have him at top 10. But I just don't know if I really see that guy who's going to, be a really great pass rusher at the next level. I think he's going to be a good pass rusher at the next level. I think he's going to be a good run defender. But I don't know. I just don't know if I see him as that real high upside pass rusher.
I mean, he's kind of Ojulari-esque in that, like, he's got a really nice kit, and he's a very high upside athlete. The problem is that, like, if that was all true, especially where he was playing at Kansas State, you would have expected him to kind of take over a lot more than he did. And I thought his games against high-end competition were his worst games, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, that is true.
And 2, even the games where he was like his best, I don't know if he ever like really took over. I don't think he's great against the run. I think he kind of starts the play with a plan. I don't think he reacts very much. And this all to say, I think he's got an awesome pass rush kit. He's an awesome athlete, and he absolutely, I think, low ceiling, high floor is a really good way to describe him. I think he'll come in as a really nuanced pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not nuanced, but like with a pass rusher with a lot of tools in his kit. But I don't know. It didn't seem like he was letting plays come to him as much as he was like. Sometimes he would like go into a play, kind of try and run his head into it, and if it didn't work, like, that was it for him for that play.
Yeah.
He'd be stuck on his block.
Yeah, he was a guy who he always kept me wanting more every time I watched him. I think, like you said, like he's a guy who on a snap by snap basis isn't as impressive as his top plays. Like if you watch his highlights, you're like, this guy's a dude. But from a snap on snap basis, it's not as good. And like you see those really highlight like really great pass rush moves, and you're like, yes, do that more often, and I'll love you. But he just doesn't do it often. So it's just like I watched it. I was like, okay, I need to see a little bit more. Like I know you can do this. Like do it. So that's kind of how I felt watching him.
Isaiah Foskey.
So Foskey, he's basically on here just as an upside play. Super athletic. He played all around Notre Dame's off ball. He played on the edge. He's moving all around. Just super athletic guy. I think he's a guy who was getting like first round hype like very early on in the draft process, and was not that's not who he is. But I think people kind of overcorrected with him and they dropped him too far down.
Yep.
I still think he's a solid player and he tested as an elite athlete, so that's why he's a 10. But it's really based on, I wanted to just put an elite athlete there. The other guy I always considered was Isaiah McGuire, who also actually tested really well.
Yeah, he's
but
11 for me, and honestly,
I think Foskey's was just a better athlete, so that was kind of the tiebreaker.
Yeah,
What about
I love Isaiah. I love Isaiah McGuire too. He just missed my list, but honestly, like I said, depending on what you think about Tyree Wilson, Lucas Van Ness, their ceiling, like Zach Harrison, Ojolari, Anaduke Azama, Tui Pulotu, are kind of in that tier where I think Isaiah McGuire is there, and like maybe I would probably put Isaiah Foskey there, and maybe even Andre Carter. But the way Andre Carter tested really hurt. But
out.
You're out. I know you've been out. Tuli Tuipulotu, man, like he's a football player.
Yes, that's a good way to describe him.
Like someone's gonna draft him, I honestly think, and like as long as like they don't try and like overthink the way that they use him. They just kind of, if they find ways to get him on the field, they're gonna find themselves with a really talented player. I think he rushes the edge well from 3 or 2 point stance. He, like, similar to some of the guys earlier, it's really nice to watch because he's got some pass rush moves. He's a slasher. Like in the run game, I really think he's underrated. I actually think he gets in the backfield like untouched way more than he should. And then like kind of similar to like the Zadarius Smith role, or like even kind of how the Danny Trevathan, not exactly a pass rusher, but the way that Danny Trevathan was used rushing the passer out of the like a stand-up position. Like I thought his pass rushes out of the stand-up position this year were awesome too. So it's kind of hard for me to project like what his fit is or where he fits, but like there's just so much to like.
Yeah, that last thing you said, like the reason he's not in my top 10 is because I just struggle where he's gonna be.
I know.
I thought his best reps came on the inside and the interior. At USC,
100%. There was plays where he would like legit would go untouched when it was like the guard and the center like had every business dealing with just him.
Yeah, and he was listed at like 6'3", 290, so I was like, oh, that's good size for a D tackle. Like he's going to be a good penetrating 3 technique. And then he went to the combine and was weighed
like
at
265,
266. So I'm like, okay, well, that's not happening anymore.
I know.
So he's
playing
on the edge.
Like, that makes sense because he was like,
he was never 290.
Way more like a slasher when he actually stood up and was straight like a 2 point stance, 2 point stance in the edge and like almost like inside linebacker position from like. I don't even know what you'd call it, like legit inside linebacker. You couldn't even call it like a technique because he was 2 yards off the ball kind of thing. So it was hard to project, but he's 20 years old. He played against some of the best competition in football, and he's got like a really like it's almost like a how do you want to get it thing. He could, honest to God, he could end up being one of the better pass rushers from this class.
Yeah, he uses his hands really well.
Yeah,
like that. Short arms, so that's gonna be an issue for him, but not like egregiously short, so he'll probably be okay there. I just liked him so much better on the interior, but yeah, I mean he can't play there, even like probably not even in maybe on passing downs, but like that's about it. So I struggled with him, and
he's crazy.
With him a lot.
He played 60 snaps at the B gap. He played 130 snaps over the tackle. He played 500 snaps outside the tackle, and he played 70 snaps off ball.
Yeah. He played all over.
He was a Swiss Army knife.
Like, I almost think that's how you get. I almost think that's how you got to use them in the NFL too. Yeah. I mean, I know there aren't a lot of teams that do that. I know the Bears don't do that, but
and you kind of get worried.
It might be the best way
drafting someone to be a Swiss Army knife because I always feel like you go back to like Isaiah Simmons. You remember from Clemson where they're like, oh, we'll just use him everywhere. And then, like, he just didn't look good anywhere, and it felt like he never really got a rhythm anywhere. So, like, I worry about something like that. But the thing is that he did look so good at all those spots where it's like maybe you just kind of bring him in and say, hey, like, where do you feel most comfortable? And the team that he gives the right answer to is going to find themselves a really good player.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move on to D-tackle. We got...
whatever amount of time left. It probably makes sense for us just to cut this and just have 4 different videos on YouTube.
Yeah, but that's actually not a bad idea. Maybe I'll do that. All right, so D tackle. So we have obviously, I mean, Jalen Carter's my number one overall player.
Yeah.
From just a film standpoint, I don't know what's going on in his personal life. I don't have any of that information, so I'm not even taking into account. Just from an on-field standpoint, Jalen Carter is my number one prospect, so he's clearly, obviously, going to be my number one D tackle.
Yep. No, it's not even worth talking about. He's amazing against the run.
Yeah.
He's amazing against the pass. His tape is ridiculous. His tape has like, if you look over the last 2 years, you could cut together a 7-minute tape of him completely like the person opposite him trying to block him, not touching him. It's insane.
Yeah.
He's so slippery. He's so strong. He's so like you would imagine all those things to be true, and you say, okay, he's got to develop some pass rush moves. Like, no, like his pass rush kit is awesome. He's the best player in the draft. Do we have to say much more?
No, I think we're good there. So let's move on to. So you would Kalijah Kancey at 2, I'd Kalijah Kancey at 3. Obviously, that's a super interesting name, a polarizing prospect because he's undersized.
If he had longer arms, you'd have him at 2 as well. I guarantee it.
Probably, I think probably
because his his flash is the best in the class. I mean, other than Jalen Carter.
Yeah. If you're not taking into account his size at all or length issues at all, if you're just going on production and tape, he's clearly 2, and would be probably in conversation with Jalen Carter. But he's 6'1", 280 pounds.
And it is a length thing. It's not really a size thing. He's maybe not 300 pounds, but there are some really good like defensive tackles in the NFL that aren't 300 pounds. It's the fact that he's got like people want to compare him to they both went to Pitt. People want to compare him to an Aaron Donald. Aaron Donald has 2-inch longer arms. That makes a big difference. Yeah.
Also, Aaron Donald's tape was incredible. It was otherworldly what he was doing. Kalijah Kancey's tape was really good. It was on
but
a
I would
human
honestly
level,
say Aaron Donald kind of benefited from being better against the run, but man, from a just straight pass rush point of view, the flashes on Kancey's tape are about like people say you want to look at Ed Oliver as a comparison because you don't want to compare anyone to an Aaron Donald, and that's fine. But I think from a rushing the passer point of view, Kancey's tape is way better than Ed Oliver's at rushing the passer. Honestly, I went back and watched Ed Oliver because people kept saying it. And I was like, okay, maybe I have this wrong, and I don't think that they're in the same category.
I 100% agree. Kalijah Kancey's tape was way better, and he did it against tougher competition too. So. I think I understand the comparison. I think it still is a good comparison to make, but I think he has a better chance to be better than what's his name? I lost track of that there.
Ed Oliver.
Ed Oliver.
Kancey, I mean, you'll go through the class and you'll see that no one is really a great example. Jalen Carter, probably the best, like we said, best player in the class, and you could probably argue based on competition, the best pass rusher in the class as well. Jalen Carter's pass rush win weight. I don't know how much people like to hate on PFF because they give out grades, and even though PFF does a great job of just doing advanced statistics, Jalen Carter's pass rush win rate was 16%. Kalijah Kancey's pass rush win weight. Oh my God! Pass rush.
It's been a long podcast.
Rate was almost 23%.
Yeah.
Basically one out of every 4 opportunities he had against the guards and centers in front of him, he was past them before the snap was before the ball was thrown. Yeah,
I mean it's really, really good tape, and I think most people acknowledge. I mean, there isn't anyone out there who's going to say his tape is bad. It's all anyone who's a detractor of Kancey is just size and length.
Yeah,
and it's going to be interesting to see where he goes because I could see him going top 10, maybe sneaking into that 9, maybe the Bears at 9. I doubt
he doesn't make it out of the top 20.
You don't think so? Because the Eagles at 10 makes sense.
The problem is I've seen grinding the mocks is great for it, but he gets mocked to the Lions at 17 pretty much every mock draft that he's still there, which is kind of hurts my heart because I've seen mock drafts where the Lions come away with Devin Witherspoon and Kalijah Kancey, and it was like, oh, make it stop.
Yeah,
but it's so good. I mean, he's gotten better every year. He's a classic phone booth guy where if you give him a 1.5 feet on either side of the guard, he can make it so that he's in a backfield in a 1.5 seconds. He lived in the backfield.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't know if there's much else we could say. I mean, like,
Yeah.
he's really good. It's just like I think the reason I had him at 3 and Benton at 2 was because I think there's a world where Kalajdzikanski's out of football in a few years
Yeah, I
because
know
of
what you
just his
mean. But
size and length. Like, I think he is a great upside, but
of the
I
people we
just
have listed here, I'd be surprised if Kalajdzikanski was within 15 pounds of any of them.
yeah. And Benton, and the reason I had Benton, part of the reason I had Benton too, is I have a hard time seeing Benton not being a successful pro.
Yep,
He
I
does
agree.
everything so well. I think his ceiling is good too. I mean, he had an 8.9 RAS score from a nose tackle. Like, this is a guy who's going to be,
Yeah.
a one gap, one technique. And he had an 8.9 RAS score. He's strong as hell. Like,
Strong as hell.
strong as hell. I don't see a situation where he's not a productive pro.
He's got good
Like,
pass rush moves too. He can slash.
he can
He
slash.
can also.
His hump move is.
We said this term a lot. He can sit on a block, and I don't think
Yeah.
Kalajdzikanski can do that.
No, I think college
Benton
is
can hold you
better
there for
against
2
the
or 3
run.
seconds, watch the play, and as soon as it comes time to make the play, just yank you out of the way.
Yeah, Kalajdzikanski is better against the run than I think you would someone would expect, just like looking at him and seeing his measurables. But yeah, Benton is a different story. Like, this guy is gap like that. He can one gap. He can move with the offensive line on outside zone and still make plays. Like, he can make plays in the backfield. He can make plays down the line of scrimmage. He does it all, and I think I'm going to be higher on him than most people. I think most people would probably have him at 4, or like you have him, which is completely fair. I just think his floor just makes it so, like, I would take him at the end of the first if I had to pick back there.
I could have put him. I honestly could have put him at 3. My only thing is that the way that Wisconsin used him made me a little wary, in that I felt like he gassed easily. He was part of a rotation at Wisconsin where he came out for maybe 30 or 40% of the snaps every game. And it makes me wonder how much of how much you'll get at him from a year in, year out basis in the NFL. That was my only concern, because when he was on the field, his tape is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair concern. And I have if you want to put, I have no problem with you putting Adebawari out of him, because he has that upside play. That's perfectly reasonable. But Adebawari is an interesting guy. I think we should talk about him a lot, because he's getting a lot of hype now. Like, he blew up the combine, blew up his pro day, everything like that. I think the tape is not as good as you want it to be, especially for a guy who's switching positions. But man, you that athleticism combined with that length and that strength, like, man, the sky's the limit. Like, he could be really, really good.
It's funny, he's kind of like Kalajdzikanski, in that, like, the things that we said about Kalajdzikanski are kind of true of Adebawari as well, and those are the things that you want of him. But he kind of checks a couple of the boxes that you worry about Kansi as well. Like, Adebawari is long. Adebawari is a little bit stronger. Adebawari ran, wide receiver type speed.
Yeah.
But the downside is that the tape was never as dominant. He played not almost exclusively edge, but I bet you if you talk to him, he'd call himself an edge. And I think because of some of the size stuff, like, I'd be surprised if he plays the edge at the NFL. Although, to be fair, the way he tested, like, you'd have to be able to give him the chance, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But man, he's upside.
Upside play. That's what it is.
Like, if he can develop a little bit more nuance to his pass rush kit.
Although he's got no pass rush. I thought he had like 0 pass rush moves. Like, if he doesn't shoot the gap,
especially from the inside. The fact that but he does get lucky that his get off is as good as it is, which and we've said, like, there is very rarely a gap in athleticism like there is from an offensive tackle to a defensive tackle, or offensive line to a defensive line. So he should be able to translate. But I think I would have been lower on him if he didn't go to the Senior Bowl and look as good as he did.
Yeah.
He went to the Senior Bowl
that's fair.
and started to put together some of that stuff where I was like, okay, you know what? I feel like those reps, like, lean themselves to the defense, where it's just a one-on-one. Like, I'm going to kind of come in with a plan and see if I can execute it against you. And when you're that good of an athlete, you should be able to execute it that frequently. And I thought that, like, he struggled against some of his better competition. I thought he struggled against Weipler. I thought he struggled against Tippmann. So, like, I thought some of the better competition had me having, second guesses about him. But it's a full upside thing. He flashed as high as almost anyone in the class, and I mean, man, you could argue there hasn't been a defensive tackle edge player that tested as good as him in the last decade.
Yeah, 4.49 40-yard dash
4.49
is a 10 from the defense. That's
Jackson
the highest.
Smith and Jigba just
40
ran a
rush
4.52 or whatever,
Yeah.
and we were like, perfect. That's good enough.
Honestly, let's put Adebaware at wide receiver or tight end or something. That'd be
Perfect.
sick. But yeah, I think I do think he's getting overhyped right now. Because he's getting like first round talk. I don't think he's a first round player. I think he's got plenty of upside. I'm willing to take a swing
he's
at
going
that,
first
like
round
in the second round. But yeah, the first round talk to me is ridiculous because I don't think his tape
some
was
guy's
that
gonna
good.
bank on him. I mean, let me look at the draft order right now.
I mean, I kind of agree with you. I do think he goes back end of the first round, but I just think that's too high.
You mean
that's
straight,
too rich for my blood.
Straight tape.
Yeah, not a first round player, but at that athleticism, I'm not going to blame a team for taking him, but I wouldn't do it.
No, I mean Philly picks 30.
Yeah, that could be one. That has Philly written all over it. Yeah.
So Philly.
And then he'll
in 2 years he's so good.
He'll sit behind Javon Hargrave for a year or two and then be an absolute dominant.
Jordan Davis. They'll probably draft Jalen Carter at 9.
Just only defensive tackles for drafting. Like, all right.
Who else we got? For all the same reasons you did. His tape's awesome.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if I think his upside is as high as the 3 guys I have ahead of him, but I don't think he's got bad upside whatsoever. It's kind of more of a RAS thing, and to be fair, Keanu Benton probably isn't the 3 technique as much as he is maybe closer to like he's
a 1
really a 1, but yeah, I got him at 4. I think he's gonna be a great pro. We both have Mazi Smith in our top 5. Actually, to be honest, our top 5 is the same.
Is it? Yeah, it is. I guess it's that same, just different order.
I have a Jomo over Brissy, but we should probably talk about Brissy.
Yeah,
so a lot of people would have Brissy, if not at 2, at 3.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't.
Do you know why?
Why they have him that high? The athleticism, I guess. I mean, he's super athletic. I'm gonna see how did he test again. He tested really well. I looked this up earlier when I was making this list. He tested really well.
Good in shorts at the combine.
And his athleticism showed up on tape. So it's not that situation where you're like, oh, I can't believe that guy tested that well. He tested 9.61, which is really good. But I thought his play strength wasn't great.
He kind of feels to me like when Sam Darnold keeps bouncing around the league because he was the first overall pick. He was like he might have been the number 1 recruit in the class coming into Clemson.
I believe he was the number 1 recruit, yeah.
And
he kind of just sat on.
I think got a lot of love to that. And he had the injury from in his junior year, and then obviously he had it's been pretty well documented what happened with his sister. So there was a lot of reasons that you could say this year was a very, very bad year to evaluate Brian Brissy. Now, he did flash, and I honestly, despite the fact of what I just said, I honestly thought that this year was his best year from a pass rushing point of view. I think maybe he took a step back as a run defender. But man, the thing is that like there weren't flashes. I didn't see plays where I was like, okay, that's the reason he's a first round pick. That's the reason he's a top 15 round pick. He didn't. Mazi Smith has plays where you go, okay, that makes sense. Obviously, Adebaware has those plays that floor to you. But like Brian Brissy, like I don't know, I just didn't see any like he didn't put together, especially from a game point of view, any one game where he was the man.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, he never took over a game. I mean, people talk about Jalen Carter like, oh, he didn't have production, he didn't take over games, but then they'll have Brian Brissy ranked as like their number ahead of him or like high. It's like, well, it's the same thing with Brian Brissy. I thought a lot. I mean, he did a really good game this year against North Carolina. I think that game he kind of did. I don't know, maybe not take over, but he played really, really well. But a lot of his production in that game came rushing from the edge or like as a 5 technique, not rushing as like a 3 technique. So that's why I struggle. Like he's going to play.
He was 100% thought he was better against the edge.
Yeah, and you move closer. The more you move closer, you move him to the football. The more concerns I have about his play strength and his diagnosing skills and stuff like that. I looked up, by the way, he was the number 1 recruit in the nation that year. He's the number 18th ranked recruit all time, which is pretty crazy.
Man.
But
yeah, I mean, you could argue that if he did play better at edge, I mean, they really didn't do it a whole lot. He might have got 3 or 4 snaps every game at that position, which I thought was maybe. I mean, he got some at 5, but never outside the tackle. And I kind of think with the athlete that he is, I think almost like a Lucas Van Ness situation, he really does need to kind of gain some steam going in. He can slash a little bit, and there are some plays when he drives guards into the backfield, but it was so few and far between. And like to some extent, you can't tell me that if what he was doing at the, at the B gap or the A gap position was more impressive than when Mozzie Smith or even Siaki Ika was doing at that position.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, Mozzie Smith was way better than Brissy. I didn't think it was close. Plus, he also has the athleticism, so it wasn't really a difficult decision to rank that there. So yeah, I think Brian Brissy is another guy. I think he's going to go higher. He's going to probably be drafted before Mozzie Smith. Probably drafted before Keanu Benton. Maybe before Adebaware.
Certainly going to get drafted before Moro Jomo.
So he will 100% be drafted. But I like that you put him. I liked Ojomo.
Dude, I'm standing on it.
I'll
go to war for Moro Jomo. He is a very true, like maybe I would say he's not a 1 tech, he's not a 5 tech, but if you just put him at 3 tech, he's gotten better every year. This year, honest to God, man, I thought his tape was awesome. His play strength is through the roof. I think he tested athletically way better than I expected him to. He's a great run defender, and this year, it felt like he really put his pass rush kit together, man. He has some moves. It wasn't just like I'm going to try and be a better athlete than you. I think some guy's going to draft him in the 4th or 5th round and just be absolutely enthralled by him for 4 years.
He seems like a guy because he came out completely out of nowhere this year. I don't think he was on a lot of people's radar. Definitely not just draft Twitter's radar. Maybe NFL teams, but not really on anyone's radar. And I think people are just slow to adjust to that. People have moved him up into that 4th round range, but I think he's better than that. To be honest, I like to tape a lot.
Man, from a tape point of view, there are very, very few tackles in this class that are better than him. They honestly gave him some reps at edge as well this year, which honestly I was fairly impressed by it. I didn't think he did a bad job at all. But when he played good competition, he played great. And honestly, I got no issue saying his flashes, his good plays are better than Adeboware's for a joke.
Yeah, I think that's honestly fair because I think Adebaware doesn't have as many flash plays.
If Adebaware, I feel like if Adebaware tested worse, that we'd be struggling to put him in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, if he tested as just a 9.0 athlete instead of a 10 athlete, I think I probably would have put him
much lower.
He would have made my top 10. I think I would have had him probably closer to 9, maybe 8 or 9.
But it feels like to me, man, the reasons that people love Adebaware, they have to love Ajomo for, and it's stunning to me that he hasn't got the love that he should. He's got if you go out and watch his games and just go from a play-by-play point of view, you're gonna find out that you're giving him check marks on so many more plays than it seems like people are giving him. I think he's gonna make someone really, really happy.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. 100%. So yeah, that it's kind of like if you are a team that really loves Adebaware and you don't get him in the 1st round or 2nd round, you're like, okay, I'm gonna backup plan Moro Ojomo in the 3rd or 4th, and you might even get a better player. Who knows?
Dude, 100%.
Zach Pickens. Zach Pickens is a guy I watched initially, and I was like, this guy's fine, whatever. I didn't really like anything like that. Well, his combine was good, but then I went back and watched his tape because I was putting together this list. I was like, okay, I need to watch more Zach Pickens because I don't have a good grasp on who he is, and I don't want to just rank him without knowing that. So I went back and watched him, and I watched 2 or 3 games, and I was like, this guy's actually really, really good.
Man, the 3 guys that you have in the bottom 4, other than Ajomo, Pickens, Dexter, and Redmond, were all 3 guys that after the combine,
I went back and was
Yeah.
like, these guys move way too good. Like
Yeah.
there's something I must have missed. And honestly, like I think like Zach Pickens, man, I'm
Yeah.
with you. He didn't make my list, and honestly, I thought defensive tackle was the toughest. Like
I agree.
Carl Brooks, I thought deserved to have a look at this list. Byron Young, man, I've been so high on for so long that I sent you a list earlier today, or
He sent me
maybe
like 3
yesterday,
lists.
and then I was like, no, I can't because there's so many people that I like. Like there was a world where Kobe Turner and Siaki Ika like didn't make my top 10.
They
But,
they
like,
didn't make mine.
I know.
It was tough. Like I said, I mean, I consider both those guys. This is tough.
Javon Dexter too, man.
Yeah, I will
But
back to
talk to me about Zach Pickens.
just like just one more thing because like I thought it was just because we've talked a lot on previous guys where we said like their highlights are so good, but on a snap by snap basis, like it wasn't as impressive. I think it's the exact opposite for Zach Pickens. His highlights, if you watch his highlights, you're gonna be like, this guy's not really anything to write home about. But if you watch him on a snap by snap basis, he's stout against the run. He's got good quickness. He doesn't have great pass rush moves, but he can get upfield and penetrate and just always in the right spot, smart player. Like that's just the kind of guy who's going to be a successful pro, more so than these guys like Adebaware, who I obviously have ranked ahead of him, but who have those flashes but don't have it as on the consistent play by play basis.
Man, that's kind of it's getting late.
Long podcast.
I know. That's kind of the how I feel about Byron Young is that I don't know how
true.
flashy like his game plan was, but I thought that like, as far as like honestly like one of the better run defenders in the nation. I thought that he very, very rarely get moved off his spot. I thought he did a great job. We've talked about it earlier, sitting on blocks and being able to shed them when time comes. Like I honest to God thought he did a better job of sitting on blocks and dealing with double teams than both Mozzie Smith and Siaki Ika. And he gives up 30 or 40 pounds to both of them.
Yeah.
On top of that, I thought his flashes in the pass rush game were way more impressive than I expected them to be. And I think that's like seriously, I think there's a chance that of all the people I have listed here, he has a chance to jump higher than I have him rated when he becomes a pro than anyone else here. Like if he ends up better than Mozzie Smith, Moro Jomo, Bressie, maybe even Benton and Adebaware, like it would not surprise me. Byron Young, I think, has a lot of upside.
Yeah, this like you said, this was a tough position to rank your top 10 because I wanted Byron Young to get in there and just didn't end up. I probably could have put him over Redmond, but I really just wanted to give a shout out to Redmond because I think
love Redmond too.
He's really good. But yeah, Byron Young, I agree with you. Very similar to Zach Pickens, where those guys are just going to be long time NFL players, but maybe not super upside. And I agree with you what he said about Ika. Like Ika, I did not feel like stood up against double teams that well.
Dude, kind of got moved more than like I really liked Siaki Ika going into last year and thought this year he was gonna make like a big jump, and it was like, all right, well, you didn't really not only did you not make them like he kind of felt like almost the exact same player.
Yeah, and not that he was getting blown up by double teams, and then I was like, okay, well, he's more athletic than he should be at like 340 pounds. Like he's gonna go to the combine and test pretty well, and then he tested very, very badly. And I know nose tackle, you don't need to be an elite athlete, obviously, but it helps if you're an elite athlete. So once I saw that, I was like, man, I can't put him over these guys who are better pass rushers with pretty good tape. So
Siaki Ika, like didn't he? What did he test at like 355?
No, he was a little lighter. That's the thing. Like he shed weight to test well and then tested poorly. So maybe that's part of it. So let's see. He 2.75 RAS score at 335. So he was listed at like 350. Went the combine at 335 and couldn't move. So that's
honestly, God, I thought last year he flashed more. I thought this year,
for sure,
like
100%.
to some extent, there were some moments where I was like, oh, dude, like if you want to be that big, like kind of like Dontari Poe-esque player, we're going to need to see more. And him going out and testing the way that he did really hurt it. So he fell down my board. He fell right off your top 10, which I think is fine.
Yeah.
I honestly think Kobe Turner is one of the most slept on players in this draft, man.
Yeah, I liked Turner. I don't know. I just feel like he's not athletic enough to really. Here's just what I say about Turner. I looked up his PFF grades before I watched him, and he had like a 90 PFF grade, like something elite. And I was like, this guy's gonna be a stud. And then I watched him, and I was like, all right, this guy's like
Okay,
good.
you know
But
what?
he does
Okay,
not. It did. The scores just didn't match up.
I'll
It
tell
was
you why I
weird.
think that is, and I think that makes sense. I didn't know that, but that makes sense because I think on a snap by snap basis, he's one of the most consistent players in the defensive
Yeah.
tackle class. And I think his flashes are about as high as some of the people in the class. So I think if you add those up, that's probably why PFF really likes him. But like, man, I thought there were some moments where like his push pull, his like swim move, like in a box were like as good as some of the other players in the class, like doing some of Jomo stuff. Like I thought he could really slash. And I would honestly say that like across the breadth of his tape, he was like a really consistent, like won't ever hurt you on third down, one of your better run defenders all year in that position. Like I don't know, like I really don't know what his projected draft spot is, but I've got like I don't know if like seriously, like I don't understand why he couldn't be looked at in the second round. Wake Forest competition, but seriously, if he's there near the end of the third round or if he's there at the beginning of the fourth, like I would run to the podium.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy you could probably get on day 3. I think he probably ends up on day 3. So
Do
I
you
didn't have my
do you
top
have
10, but
do we have a RAS on him? Talk
yeah,
to me about him as
7.1. No 40-yard dash, no vertical. But
I
he
love
did it
how-
with 7.08 3-cones, really good for 293, 449 short shuttle.
Damn, see?
31 bench reps too, which is good. So, but then 31 inch arms, just short. But
It is short.
I mean, we're talking about a 4th round guy here, probably maybe 3rd round. So
Seriously, I think
really nitpicking.
I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna send you some tape on Kobe Turner. There's some stuff where I honestly think like it was up there with like. To be honest, I think his play style is similar to Keanu Benton.
Okay, I mean, I didn't hate him. I just yeah, no. Seven. I'm actually curious because
I'll
I
send
do
you some
think I am definitely lower on him than you, and I think I'm lower on him than other people. So send me something, and I'm
To be honest,
open
I think wherever you have him is probably similar because I don't hear
Yeah.
anybody talking about him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Did we get through it? Did we do the 2-hour podcast?
Yeah, I think we're done. There's a couple of guys, but I need to get to bed, honestly.
Is there anybody else?
I know you do. You're 2 hours
Yeah.
ahead of me. So
It's 1 a.m. here. Do you? Is there anybody that just missed your defensive tackle list?
let me see. I can't think right now. Not really, honestly. I mean, like we kind of talked about some guys, Carl Brooks, Kobe Turner. I don't know if I really strongly consider them. I'd say Byron Young just missed for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
Should we talk about?
no one really
should we at least mention Carl Brooks because I know a lot of people are higher.
Yeah, sure.
On him. And honest to God, there's probably a bunch of people at the bottom of our list that Carl Brooks is going to go higher than. Carl Brooks, defensive tackle out of Bowling Green, right?
Yep.
And honestly, you'll go watch his tape, and you'll wonder why we left him off the list because he looks like a freak amongst the people he's playing with. He looks bendy, he looks quick, he looks strong, and I think all those things are true. And then you go and watch him at the combine or at his pro day because he didn't get invited to the combine. And he's, a below average to bad athlete. And then it makes you kind of reevaluate all the things that you saw.
Right. How much of it was playing against Bowling Green competition, or is he really good? Like that's what I struggle with. And he played almost exclusively on the edge.
That's the other thing too, is that the way that he tested and the way that he's kind of like the way that he weighed in, he is almost exclusively as far as like the way that he's used was an edge, and the way that he projects is an interior defender.
Yeah, I mean he's 6'3", 303 pounds. I mean that's an interior defender all day. 5.86 RAS score with 31 inch arms. So you got a guy who is coming from a small school. That's a tough transition to the NFL. You got a guy has very short arms. That's going to make it a tough transition. You got a guy who's a below average athlete, and you have a guy who's changing positions. That's very tough to overcome.
Not only that, but like they almost never used him inside the tackle, and that's what they're going to be asking him to do. He did a lot of 5 technique, which isn't inside the tackle, but it's not outside the tackle. Yeah. But I would say that his best tape came outside of the tackle, and honestly, his best tape came against his worst competition. When he played the competition like I think when he played, he had a game UCLA. He played this year, and I didn't think he looked great.
Yeah,
And I
I
was
think he it was either Ole Miss or Mississippi State. I think it was Mississippi State, and he did not do anything. He didn't look good at all.
which is a
So.
shame because if you talk about flashes, his flashes were good, and I know that we had Tommy Cavanaugh on the podcast, one of the Bears blog boys recently, and he loves Carl Brooks. He's drinking the PFF Kool-Aid.
I thought he was low on Carl Brooks. How did I get that mixed up?
Oh no, he may have
I don't
recently
know.
come around because I think the way that he tested made a lot of people go damn.
Yeah.
But when we had him on, he was he had Carl Brooks pretty high, and like you go watch the tape, and if you like it's the classic. If you watch Carl Brooks highlights 2022, you'd be like, this guy's a second round pick.
Yeah.
But there's just more to it than that. So I think he probably he would have been in that 11 to 12 range. Honestly, Jalen Redmond or Zach Pickens probably could have been my 11.
Yeah,
But
honestly, I think Carl Brooks probably would have been like 15 for me.
the thing that's crazy is he's gonna get drafted. Like people that know more than us have him going in the third round. PFF Brad had him mocked in the second round.
I'm trying to see where Rugler has him.
Does he even have him?
Where is he? I was gonna say I don't even see him. Oh no, he has him at 16.
For what position does he have, Matt?
Defensive tackle. I think he's. I don't hate him. I just think he's going to get drafted higher than where I would feel comfortable drafting.
I know, and he looked, and for a guy that's going to play defensive tackle, he looked his best without his hand on the ground.
Yeah, for sure. All
right. 2 hours, 10
2
minutes.
hours, 10 minutes. Not bad. Pretty good. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. If you're still listening, you're the best. Thank you, because this is.
Yeah.
I was even zoning out.
I'm not even listening.
Yeah, I'm not listening to what Luke is saying. So thanks. Thanks everyone for listening. Make sure to subscribe. We'll be back next week. I think we talked about potentially doing 2 next week. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll try. I mean,
we'll at least
go over. We definitely
we'll
need to talk about
one.
some of the rumors that are going on. If you're still watching, God bless you. Tell one other person about this podcast.
Love that. Yeah, and if everyone tells one person, we're rolling.
I know for a fact that there are very few Bears podcasts out there that are doing what Steve are. So
yeah, if there's one thing Bears Twitter is missing is more podcasts.
But that's it.
All right, that's it. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bear down.
Cheers.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, Steve.